there, true believers. This is Head Speaks, a proud member of the Headcast Network family of shows. As usual, I am your host, Aaron Moss, aka Head. This is my mostly monthly Headcast, where I talk about comics, movies, role-playing games, TV shows, and anything else geeky that I want. So sit back and enjoy the ride. Let's begin.
What height will hit on when the show is hit?
Welcome to our 37th episode of Head Speaks. Not much preamble. We're going to get started with our show. Stay tuned. We've got a new segment to roll out a little bit later on. And I just want to thank everyone that's joined in, everyone that listens, everyone that supports me, everyone that shares and reshares and retweets my posts. Thank you guys very much. But let's go and get started. Let's start with...
Faster than a speeding bullet.
In the great hall of the Justice League,
Spider-Man and his amazing friends.
the Justice League of America versus the Legion of Doom. This is What's in Head's Long Box, dedicated to truth, justice, and peace for all mankind. The world's greatest super friends.
And welcome to another segment of What's in Head's Long Box. I am continuing my multi-episodic saga of the Armageddon 2001 crossover. So far I've got them out on time, knock on wood, and I've had some great guests so far. That's going to change. Seriously, I'm going to do Justice League America Annual number 5 today, and I want to go to the one person that knows about Justice League International, or Justice League America, someone I love listening to on their podcast, someone that's, that's a great podcaster, but Rob Kelly was a little busy, he's got the restraining order, so I went to this other guy instead, the irreplaceable
Irrepressible Shag. I like to think that you're bringing up the level of guest here, because previously you've had Jared Albrick and Michael Bailey. You're really not setting the bar very high. Jack and Pat were fine, but those other two jokers, you got to be kidding me. So I feel like really this is becoming a little more caviar and champagne level episode, I think.
Probably. I don't care for caviar and champagne, so probably.
You're all class, my friend. All class.
No, I kid. Cause I love Shag. Shag is one of the ones that got me. I listened to his Fire and Water podcast, and that's one of the things that got me into podcasting, got me doing half the shows I do.
Just for legal reasons, this is the point where I have to state any problems you have with Aaron's shows are not actually a result of our fault. So we cannot be held liable for whatever experience you might have listening to Aaron's shows. It's a legal thing. I have to say it. The lawyers make me. But anyway.
He's got the lawyer standing there in the corner talking to him, so I understand. Yep. Most people, when they do it, have to have lawyers involved, so it's okay. I'm fine with it. Especially if the whole Justice League Embassy issue we had here a while back.
Oh, good.
Over on your Justice League podcast. I understand the lawyers. For anyone curious about that, check out Shag's Justice League Wahaha podcast, episode 13, where I made myself a guest.
Yeah, unfortunately, no one else was available. So, yeah, he came on to talk about the crossover between Justice League International and Suicide Squad, yes, which was some great comics and lousy podcasting. So,
speaking of lousy podcasting, Shag, why don't you go ahead? Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience? Tell them who you are and you give me your initial thoughts on Armageddon 2001.
Absolutely. My name is the Irredeemable Shag, and I am one of the co-founders of the Fire and Water Podcast Network, where we cover a ton of different shows about comic books and stuff. But we'll talk about all that later. But that's basically who I am. Aaron and I have known each other for a long, long time, and I'm very excited to be part of this coverage because I was reading Armageddon 2001 as it came out. I was very excited about it. Each issue would come out. We'd all talk about it. We all had our speculations. Then, like everyone else in the world that you hear all the stories about, sure enough, word got to us about who supposedly Monarch was and how it had been leaked. I heard a different story about how it got leaked, but than the version you shared on a previous episode. But the bottom line was I still heard the same name everyone else did, which was interesting because, back then there was no internet. How did this crap get around? It's amazing.
Yeah, I heard the same thing. I don't remember where I heard it from. Because, I only had one friend I talked to comics about, and I'd go to my comic shop.
Let's be honest.
Yeah, there was no internet.
Aaron, you only had one friend, period, so probably.
That's what I said. I was just classing it up a little bit, make it sound nicer. I had one friend that would talk. Okay, I had one friend. You're right.
Well, I heard about it in a comic book shop, and it was just, guys staying around the comic shop. Guys, because back then, ladies weren't coming around the comic shops back then. We've come a long way, thankfully. But guys staying around talking around the comic book shop about who everyone thought it was, and then I heard this, and it's been leaked, and we're like, really? And it's just amazing how that kind of stuff gets around.
Yes, I don't remember where I first heard it, but yeah, I do recall hearing that later on. What the heck?
And it's like Mikey and Pop Rocks. Everybody heard it somehow. So I was very excited about Armageddon 2001. Each issue was I was like, oh wow, can't wait, et cetera, et cetera. I loved Dan Jurgens. I loved the introductory special. Some of the annuals were better than others, as you guys have been discussing. The ending was, same as everyone else. It was like, ugh, really? So it was a big letdown. And then the subsequent two miniseries, Alien Agenda and Armageddon Inferno. Man, I can't remember. Are you planning to cover those miniseries?
I haven't decided yet. I'm back and forth on that. Part of me wants to just to be the completist that I am, but part of me's like, I read them, but I don't know.
They're really bad.
Have fond memories.
They're really.
I don't have fond memories.
They're really, really bad.
So I may cover in one episode, maybe, or I don't know. I know. Yeah, I haven't decided.
Well,
yet.
you could do one episode on Alien Agenda, one episode on Armageddon Inferno, and the only thing you really need to talk about Armageddon Inferno is they brought the JSA back, because that's all that really mattered.
That's the main thing. I remember the first one had the two people going back in time in dinosaurs, and then the Inferno. What I remember about that, the Return of the Justice Society.
Right.
That's all I remember about those two.
That's all you really need to. But those are my initial thoughts on the crossover in general.
Right on. Well, let's go ahead and cover this one. So we've talked about the main issue. We talked about the Superman annual. Then he went over and talked with Batman. And then he takes a little detour to the Justice League America. There was no of at this time. This was after it turned out. It was originally Justice League, then became Justice League International. And then, not too long before this, I think, it became Justice League America and Justice League Europe.
Oh, it was a ways before this. Because they're already starting right around the Breakdowns era when this issue came out.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
I guess it was a couple of years.
Yeah, so it'd be at least 2 or 3 years since it had split between Justice League America and Justice League Europe. Mm-hmm.
So that's why I've got you on here, someone that can correct me when I'm wrong.
It's not hard to do.
I usually have my wife to do that, but I've got you here to do that. So.
And you know what? I bet she has to do it all the time. Michelle's a pretty smart lady, so. I mean, other than her choice in men, but.
I was going to say, other than her choice in men, yeah, she is a rather smart woman. Luckily for me, she doesn't have a good choice in men, so let's quickly move on before I get in trouble. We're here to talk about Justice League America Annual number 5. The cover date on this was 1991, but to buy this fresh off the newsstand, you had to be buying comics May the 28th of 1991. The cover price was at $2, which back then was, wow, $2 for a comic? That's a little expensive. Nowadays, I wish you could buy a comic for $2. The title is Tomorrow's League Today. The plotter is Keith Giffen. The scripter, J. Mark DeMatteis. The penciler, sit back and hold on, there's a long list of pencilers. Steve Carr, Chris Sprouse, Derek Robertson, Marshall Rogers, Kevin McGuire, Dan Jurgens, Joe Phillips, Ty Templeton, and Linda Medley. The inkers was Jose F. Marizan Jr., probably mispronouncing that, and Bruce D. Patterson. The letter was Bob Lappin. Colorist, Gene D'Angelo, and editor, our good buddy Andrew Heffler. The cover was done by Steve Carr and Joseph Rubinstein. And this was reprinted in the Justice League America Annual number 5. There was a variant cover.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, unless it was a reprint, I don't know why there was a variant. All this information came from Mike's Amazing World of Comics.
Well, that would be my suspicion. Again, I haven't researched this yet myself, but I would suspect it was probably a second printing, simply because Armageddon 2001 was a pretty hot seller in the beginning. And so they were probably some, and so it would probably be a second printing, which would mean probably the same cover, but something would have been slightly different, a different color, whatever.
Or sometimes got the Roman numerals on there.
If only there was some way to research this. If only there was some tool at our fingertips that would allow us to look this kind of information up, but that is lost to the ages, so we'll never know.
Yes, we'll never ever know.
Yeah.
The story continues the adventures of Waverider in a search for Monarch. He decides to visit the halls of the Justice League International disguised as Captain Atom. There he finds the team standing vigil over Maxwell Lord, who was recently shot. After Elrond, the first member he finds and touches is the Martian Manhunter. We find the Martian Manhunter is living at the top of some mountain as the Green Guru, a traveler to spend his time searching out the Guru for answers to life. Contrary to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the answer is Oreos, according to John. The man, upset by such an absurd answer, storms out. Back in modern day, Waverider is touched by Guy Gardner, where we find that in the future, Guy becomes a religious leader. He's preparing to speak to his flock when he's accidentally bonked on the head. The newspaper reveals that Nice Guy finishes last. Next up, he touches Beetle, who we find has gained a little weight and lost his right to the Blue Beetle. It appears that he sold the Blue Beetle to get some extra fast cash, as they refuse to let him continue on as the Beetle. He tried another identity as the stupendous Silverfish, but was arrested for copyright infringement. To make ends meet, he's had to resort to being a bug spray salesman on TV. Waverider then touches Ice, who we find out has become a crazy cat lady. She hears on TV that Guy has been hit on the head and has reverted to nice Guy. She runs out to finds him on a beach where they confess their love for each other. Next up, Waverider touches Fire, who we find at a church where she's getting ready to watch Ice and Guy tie the knot. As her and Oberon talk about Ted Kord and what's happened with him, Oberon asks Bee to marry him. And this is when Ted decides to burst in, accusing Bee of destroying his life. After a little back and forth, we find out that Bee owns the company that Ted sold his identity to. We see a newspaper with the headline, Ex-Superhero Arrested After Attempt on Woman's Life.
All right, I'll take it from there. Back at the embassy, Waverider then touches Booster Gold. We find out, by the way, his real name is Michael, that back in the future, on probation, he's working at the Space Museum as a janitor once again. He goes into the Hall of Heroes and finds an exhibit on his old friends, Batman, Superman, Hal Jordan, and Guy Gardner. He even finds an exhibit on Blue Beetle and himself as Booster Gold. His is rather sparse, and no one ever really knew who his real name was. Ted's is a bit worse, which sends Michael into a panic. He finds Maxwell Lord's exhibit and learns that he retired to Kahui to become a beachcomber. He rushes to the time bubble and to find out it's locked down, of course. Meanwhile, we find Waverider as he touches Mr. Miracle, a.k.a. Scott Free. Scott and Shiloh, who is the new Mr. Miracle, are training a team of escape artists called the Miracle Squad. As Scott and his wife Big Barda are talking about the business and home life, Oberon comes in and informs them that Ted, a.k.a. Blue Beetle, was arrested and he, Oberon, is engaged to Bee, a.k.a. Fire. It's a lot of names to keep track of, folks. Well, Scott is planning on how to break Ted out of prison and get him and Fire in the same room. Barda tells him to stay and keep training the team while she goes to deal with Bee. Waverider then meets and touches General Glory. We find Max visiting the geriatric Joe Jones, the General's alter ego. Max is trying to talk Glory into helping him reform the JLI. The General refuses until Max brings up America, the flag, and apple pie. He recites his oath, and there on the bed stands General Glory. After Max convinces the UN to reinstate the League, General Glory holds his first meeting with the new League, consisting of Booster Gold, Blue Beetle, Ice, Aquaman, Guy Gardner, and two unidentified women, one of whom might just be Crimson Fox. The entire team are sporting Ernie haircuts, Ernie being General Glory's old partner, a.k.a. Bucky, and it's a haircut like Guy Gardner's. After verifying that none of the so that's that future. Then, back in the present, after verifying that none of the League had become Monarch, Waverider decides to go visit Max in the hospital and check his future. In Max's future, he is relaxing on Kahui until a metal box pops out of thin air, depositing the time travel Booster Gold. Booster convinces Max to return to the States to inform the League and get Bee to drop the charges against Ted. After a little talk and a little mind manipulation, Max convinces Fire to drop the charges and sign over controlling interest of her company to Max. Back in the present day, Waverider sees that his merging with Max has caused his condition to worsen. Finally, we see Waverider in disguise reading a newspaper saying Maxwell Lord is at death's door. He flies off to continue his quest. And the page says, continued in Hawk and Dove Annual Number 2 and Justice League Europe Annual Number 2, which really isn't quite – it's quite a ways away still, that one.
Yeah.
All right.
Very good. Thank you for helping me with that. That's a long recap, and like you said, a lot of different characters and different names.
56 pages. And this is really a different one, really, because, you get all these little vignettes, and yet it's still all, for each character, but it's still telling one big, long story.
Right. And that's one thing I liked about this issue. But we'll get to that. First, let's look at the cover.
All right.
The cover, in case you haven't seen it, we've got all the heroes of the Just League America standing over Maxwell Lord's bed, and they're looking back at us as we see... We can't really see who it is. We know it's Waverider standing there. We see his arm and part of his leg. We get the Armageddon 2001 banner across the top.
And by the way, if you happen to have the variant cover, which, again, I just miraculously remembered without using any sort of thing that starts with G and ends with Oogle, would be the same image, except the background, which is sort of a pale green, would be silver, like the metallic silver they used to use in the 80s. And it would say, I have a little Roman numeral 2, and then on the corner box it would say Silver Series, A 2001. But that's just me guessing.
Very nice guess.
Yes.
So, Mr. Irredeemable, what are your thoughts on this cover?
Man. Okay, I love me some Justice League. I've got a podcast dedicated to it, which is going to take me about 6 years to cover the entire Giffen DeMatteis era. And there's some amazing art in that era. This is not some of it. So this is the part where you're supposed to go 1 to 5. 5 would be a poster on your wall, all that. Okay, thanks. Well done. Good job doing your job. Oh, wait, I'm doing it for you. Anyway.
Well, I was waiting for you to finish describing your thoughts on it. If that's all you've got, I figured you had more thoughts. But you know what?
It's a major disappointment, man. Now, as far as the way it's constructed, as far as the layout's fine. All the JLIers there looking over Max, staring back at, obviously, Waverider. And the cover does tell the story quite well. Because, Max is in the coma laying there. So, composition-wise, it's fine. Artistic representations of the characters, not so much. So, what about you? What do you think of it?
So, again, I agree with you for the most part. Like I said, I like Mr. Miracle. In fact, that right-hand side, starting with Mr. Miracle and working your way around, it goes from, I think, really good to, I like Mr. Miracle. Booster Gold's not bad. Blue Beetle's not bad. And then you start getting down below, you got Ice, looks like she's got a fat lip or something, and it just goes downhill from there.
Well, actually, yeah, Mr. Miracle and Martian Manhunter, I think, are probably the two best on the cover. I like the shadowing on Martian Manhunter's forehead. It looks like Waverider's, emitting light, which is causing a shadow across his brow, which I kind of like that.
Yeah, say about that. It looks kind of, it looks kind of ET-ish to me.
Oh, really? Okay, well,
a little bit.
Fair enough. General Glory looks fine, but, him and Mr. Miracle and Martian Manhunter are the ones I think the best. I don't like the way Beetle looks. I don't like the way Fire looks. I mean, they really went out of their way to make sure they showed Fire's midriff and her breasts and turn to look back at the camera. I mean, it's like a back-breaking pose for her, and it's still not that well rendered.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like I said, I don't mind Blue Beetle, but yeah, I agree with Fire. Guy's got a odd... kind of drawn odd.
Guy's got like an eyelash stuck in his eye, and something's wrong there.
Maybe he's doing an impersonation of Popeye.
Right. So who do we have to thank for this cover? Is it Chris Sprouse or is it this Carr guy?
Again, I didn't do a whole lot of research because I'm too lazy.
Right.
But I say
I'll find out in a second.
I don't. The penciler, the cover was, according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, was penciled by Steve Carr.
Okay, so Steve Carr did
and inked by Joseph Rubinstein.
The Rubinstein I could guess because the /R, that's his style. The C, I just wasn't sure if that was supposed to be the Chris Sprouse or the Carr. Okay, so okay. Carr.
Yeah, that was Chris Carr. That was not Chris.
What's that?
Steve Carr.
Oh, okay.
I was saying Chris Carr, but no, Steve Carr.
I'm not terribly familiar with Steve Carr. Now he did the framing and the bridging sequences through the issue as well. So
yeah, so on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being total crap and 5 being something you want to hang on your wall.
Look, you just did your job. Well done.
Well, you know what? Someone's got to do it.
Yeah, I already did. Anyway, man, are we allowed to do point something, or is it just straight the 1 through 5?
You know what? Since you're one of my podcasting godfathers, I will allow you to do points.
It's like a 2.3. Because, which is very specific, I realize. But 2.5 is like a halfway mark between 1 and 5.
Right.
I can't quite give it 2.5. It's not there for me. But just a little bit below that. So I'm going to say 2.3.
And you know what? I'm going to agree with you on that. I would give it a 2. Just because, 2.5 is mid-level, and this is not mid-level. Yeah, it's right below that. So I would give it a solid 2.
Yeah. The only reason it gets to 0.3 is the composition's good for me.
That's why I gave it 2 instead of 1.
Yeah, right.
But moving on to the story itself. So like I said, the whole thing's framed by Waverider interacting with the current heroes. So let's go and start at the beginning with him appearing at the embassy and coming in as Captain Atom.
That's an interesting choice right there, that he chose to be Captain Atom.
Especially considering what happens later on.
I don't know how much we're saying. I don't...
Yeah.
How much are we saying?
I'm trying to keep it as unspoiler as possible, or spoiler-free as possible.
Fair, well, it's fair to say that Captain Atom plays an important role in the Armageddon 2001 saga during this story and afterwards. That's a fact. There's nothing deniable about that. So the fact that he chose Captain Atom as a body, or at least the writers chose Captain Atom, is quite an interesting choice. Now, can I just say something about the comic itself real quick? Like, the physical comic, like, I pulled it out of my long box. Like, it's really in good condition. For a comic that's 27 years old, I guess, is that what we're looking at here?
Yeah.
It's like brand freaking new. I don't mean like, I bagged and boarded it really well. No, I just mean like the paper's really clean. The paper's still white. Not just yellow or the colors really pop. Like, I wonder if, I don't know, maybe it's just me. Maybe mine just did get preserved well, but it just seems like this, I could find this copy on the shelf today as a brand new comic. It's that well preserved. So it almost makes me think they put it on a better quality paper. It's got the square bound, rather than a staple. It's really nicely put together package.
Yeah, so I'm looking at digital, so mine's buried in my boxes over here. I haven't pulled it out yet.
Gotcha. Okay. And I only pulled mine out because my Justice League comics are very handy, so I was able to get to those. So anyway, and just like, the printing on these ads and stuff in here, like, there's not a lot of bleed through. Anyway, it just seems to be a higher quality paper. I'm just impressed. So. And
it very well could be. Because, again, this Justice League, this was during the Justice League's heyday. Mm-hmm. When they had a dozen titles out. Wasn't this when they had a dozen titles? Pretty
much. I mean, they had Justice League, they had Justice League, they had JLA, they had JLE, they had Justice League Quarterly. Mr. Miracle had his own book.
Was Extreme out yet?
No, Extreme came much later. Which is something we should all forget about anyway. You should never mention that again. I don't care. I knew you were going there. I don't care if Firestorm was in or not. Speaking of which,
and the Wonder Twins showed up.
Did you see the Elemental? Firestorm's going to be in
yes,
whatever the Doomsday Clock.
Yes, I saw. I think you posted it more than Mark. Someone posted it on your wall.
That's crazy. So it has nothing to do with this.
Sorry. Yeah, I saw that and I'm like, wow, that's really cool. That's right after I got started in the comics. So that. And written by John Ostrander, one of my favorites. So that holds a special place in my heart. So I am definitely curious about that.
So nothing to do with this.
But we're not here about Firestorm.
So I do love the framing, the idea of the framing sequence, and as I mentioned earlier, using each character and showing not just everyone's different possible future, but one coherent future, which is really cool. I think that's really good. And to use different artists for each one. I mean, come on, man. We're bagging on the Steve Carr guy, but you got. What did we say? Kevin McGuire, right? Hold on, I got to get back up to your list here.
Right.
We get Kevin McGuire, who's, of course, started the book. We got Ty Templeton, who then took over after him. You've got Marshall freaking Rogers. Oh, my gosh, amazing. You get Derek Robertson, who really was just beginning his career and would explode later. You got Chris Sprouse, who's going to explode.
Quick question for you there, Shag. Maybe you know the answer to this. Is frickin' Marshall's actual middle name?
Yeah, it is. Marshall frickin' Rogers.
Because I hear you and I hear over on the Dark Knight cast, Ryan and Chris talking about it, and every time it's mentioned, it comes up frickin'. So I was just wondering if that's on his birth certificate, it's Marshall frickin' Rogers, or if that's just an honorary.
I think maybe it is honorary. Now, Norm frickin' Brayfogle, now that is in fact his middle name. So yeah. Yeah, okay. So it might get a little. There might be a little bleed through there, but so Chris Sprouse, Derek Robinson, both of them getting ready to explode. You got Joe Phillips in here doing the Mr. Miracle segment, which makes perfect sense because he was drawing the Mr. Miracle book at the time. You got Dan Jurgens doing some because he did the Armageddon 2001 storyline there. It's really like for something that we were bagging on the cover. It's really the inside is pretty darn impressive.
Well, and it's just that cover really because. Even the intermediary parts where Steve Carr did, the framing and all that, I've got no real problem with the framing of it, the artwork in that.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
It's just that cover, it's got problems with. But yeah, the rest of the framing sequence that Steve did, I've got no problem with that artwork.
Oh, you know, one thing that your thing didn't list there was Keith Giffen also did the breakdowns. So
okay.
which would explain some of like the panel layouts that are very consistent throughout the book, because Keith did that to keep it very consistent, which makes sense. Okay,
Right.
Nice. Which might also explain this guy at the very end of the book that looks exactly like one of the guys that always shows up in the back of all Keith Giffen comics. But anyway, guy with the greasy and the sunglasses and the little mustache. Anyway.
Though talking about the credits in the front, Keith Giffen, DeMatteis, Steve Carr, Jose Morzan Jr., various other artists credit as we go.
Yep.
So I love reading these credit boxes, especially like in the Just League time there.
Right.
Kevin Dooley, Future Shock, Andy Heffler, Anachronism.
Yep.
I just love the little funny things they have in there.
So the Martian Manhunter one, where he's the Green Guru, is a little odd. It's kind of funny. It's a little throwaway, too, because it doesn't really tie into any of the rest of the story, but it's cute.
Yeah, and I could see John getting fed up with everything, just going meditating, and I do like that he thinks that at this point he was big into Oreo cookies. This was before. I don't know what happened. I'm sure you probably do, and you'll probably comment at some point along your Just League podcast. But yeah, it started out him liking Oreos, and then it went to Chocos.
Somewhere in there, yeah. I think they probably just stopped wanting to use a real name is probably what it was.
That's what I was wondering if it was something the writer said, you know what, let's change that, or if it was something Oreo said, you know what, can you guys not do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. They're still calling him Oreos at this point where I am in my coverage. I'll have to watch for that, and I can ask DeMatteis what he says. Yeah, that's a good thought. Yeah, and here where he says,
where he says
life's like an Oreo cookie, I really kind of wanted to hear where that analogy was going, because the guy cuts him off and says he's going to sue him and storms out, and I'm thinking maybe John had something insightful to say with a weird sort of analogy.
Right. Well, see, my problem in quotes with this is with this guy. He tracks all the way through the Himalayas or wherever it's at, the cold mountains, hunts down this temple to find out the secret of life from some guy he doesn't even know. And then when he tells him, he goes all this way, he spends how much money tracking this guy down, and then he doesn't like the answer, so he storms out upset. It's like, seriously, you're the one that tracked him down. He didn't ask you to come see him.
Well, he strikes me as like a super rich dude, probably, who he's making a big deal about all the effort he put into this, but he's probably only been after this for like 2 weeks, and he's like thinking, I went all this effort, how dare you not be what I want, I'm going to sue you. That's kind of how I read it, like super entitled man.
Right. But I agree with you. I would have liked to seen John's explanation for that, because I could probably see that. I mean, I'm sure John could come up with a reason why life's like an Oreo.
Yep. Sprous's art looks great, by the way. Jean just floating there in his alien form just looks gorgeous. Sprouse did a great job.
Oh no, I agree 100%. Yeah, I love John's regular form. I remember the first time we saw that. Was that in the Martian Manhunter mini?
Yeah, it was during his miniseries, American Dreams or whatever it's called, the 4-issue miniseries that came out about the first year or two of JLI. DeMatteis wrote it, Mark Badger drew it, and then they very quickly brought that same alien form over into the JLI comics.
Yeah, I remember the first time saying, what the hell? That's interesting.
Right.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I like this first little story here with John. Like I said, it doesn't tie into anything else. But it's just John off on his own, doing his own thing at this point. And again, after everything goes on, we'll find out eventually on your podcast with the Justice League. Yeah, I guess I don't blame him.
But yeah, well, also, I mean, that's kind of they used to do a lot of these future stories, whether they were Elseworlds or DC 1 Million and stuff like that, or Legion of Superheroes. And John always seemed to still be alive far in the future, and he always seemed to have become like either a hermit unto himself or joined with the planet Mars and was a living planet. I mean, all these different things. But John was always kind of like on his own is usually how this worked out. So it's not that surprising. The Guy Gardner segment, I thought that was, again, by Derek Robertson, I thought that was a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed that segment. I cracked up quite a bit.
Oh, very much so. I like the return of the old nice guy.
Yep.
And it just, I don't know how Guy would get a cult following, but...
Well, I gotta tell you, buddy, in this day and age, see this, I'm not trying to get political, folks. I'm not.
Forget I said anything.
There is no denying that our president is about creating. He loves to create controversy. True? Okay.
Yes. Yeah,
I'm not
true.
saying for bad or for worse. I don't want to get on that side of the argument. I'm just saying he loves to create controversy, which creates news, which gets people talking. And Guy Gardner's that same kind of, strong, ballsy personality. And so I can see why Guy would get a cult like this. Absolutely.
Yeah, now that you mention, I didn't think about it that way, but thinking about real world politics and what the world is like today. Yeah, you're right. So never mind. Strike my original objection. I guess I can see why Guy would get this big following.
Should just get used to saying you're right, Shag.
Yeah. Why invite you on again?
Because I'm the smartest person in the room. So Derek Robertson, by the way, if you don't know who he is, he got real big, and he did a lot of books that I enjoyed. Either way, but what he's really probably best known for is things like Transmetropolitan and The Boys. I mean, just massive hits that he really put his stamp on there, and there's just no denying it. For me, I'm trying to see. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking New Warriors was where I saw him. Yeah, New Warriors. Okay, yes, he did a great run of New Warriors, and that's where I first came across him. I was like, oh my god, this guy's amazing. And you like that? That's my impersonation of myself.
I like that. It was a very good impersonation.
Wow, I didn't know. Now I'm embarrassed to say this. I didn't know that he did a run in Justice League Europe. I guess I'll find that out soon.
Oh.
Okay.
Huh, maybe I ought to find a guy that does Justice League podcast and talk to him about this.
Yeah, I guess I should. Mike Peacock, get on that, buddy. Oh, wait, that's the other Justice League. But so, anyway, great segment with Guy. I mean, he's totally a sleazeball. I mean, he's even here's how rude he is. He's telling this girl who works for him to, pass the collection, because they got this whole auditorium full of people. And he says, pass the collection plate around twice tonight. This hall didn't come cheap. And then he says, and I expect to see you at my place after the show. Wear your little black. I mean, the guy's a total, and he gets knocked out. He's a total sleazebag. He's, having sex with his employees, bleeding his constituency blind. And he's a total dirtbag. So when him and Ice get back together later, it's sort of like, I don't know that she should really want to be with this guy. 'Cause regardless if he's nice now, he was pretty darn.
That's a different guy.
No, she makes a whole point of saying he's both. She makes this big impassioned speech about how, no, Guy, you were never just one or the other. You're both. There's signs of both versions of you in each version, and I love all of them. Never mind the guy that likes to bang the girl that dresses just like him and wears black lingerie, apparently.
Well, yeah, again, women, they love who they love, and, even the bad people have to have someone that loves them. So, but yeah, the more you describe Guy throughout here, I am seeing some real-world alignments, and it's making even more sense as we go through here.
Now, I do love, after he gets bonked in the head and he gets up there and gives all this nice guy stuff, there's a really cool full-page splash that says The Daily Planet. It's like it's supposed to be the headline, front page of The Daily Planet. Nice guy finishes last, crowd riots as cult idol changes tune. It's a really neat, effective way to convey a message in a full-page splash.
Very much so. And going back a page, after he gets bonked on the head and he sits up, and the gal he was hitting on earlier says, wait, he's not dead. The guy behind him, too bad. He would have made a great murder.
Good stuff.
I just love that line. It cracks me up every time I read it.
Yep. And he's got all of his employees dressed like him in his, his Green Lantern uniform too, by the way. So that was a fun segment.
Yeah, of course. I like that. Yeah, it was. I really enjoyed this segment. Like I say, the art was great, and this was classic Guy, who is the utmost guyness as he can be at this point. I mean, he's very, like you say, he's passed the collection plate around. Who's the guy? Who's the guy who's got millions of people wanting to walk, talk, and act just like him? You're the guy, sir. Damn right, I'm the guy. I'm the guy.
Yep.
He's just so full of himself.
Well, it's a different version, because every version of Guy that they've done really is a guy the sleazy guy is a version that everybody hates. No one likes him. So really, it's a very different dynamic here, where he's got a room full of people. So interesting.
Huh.
So then I guess
let's move on
the Blue Beetle segment. Marshall Rogers. Now I don't know whether this is pretty far along in Marshall Rogers' career, and I don't know much about Bruce Patterson as an inker. I've certainly seen Bruce Patterson a lot inking stuff, but I'm not terribly familiar with it. I guess it's still good, but it's not what I expected from Marshall Rogers. Like, if you look at his classic Batman stuff, that just knocks your socks off. This stuff's good, but it's not like, wow, So, again, I don't know if it was because Marshall in the later years or Bruce inking didn't help it any. I'm not sure. But, I mean, it's fine. There's nothing terrible about it. It just didn't grab me as much.
Or I wonder, along those same thoughts, if maybe this was something he went for because it's not supposed to be Batman. Oh, wow, this is fantastic. It's Blue Beetle. No, he's retired. Oh, he's fat. He's bald. Or balding.
Yeah.
So I've got to wonder if it's the drawing style he was doing at the time, or if it was a conscious decision to tone down his normal, like you said, great, art. And like this isn't bad, but yeah, it's not what he normally does. So I just have to wonder if this was a conscious decision or just the way he's gotten to this point in his life.
Yeah, could be. I do think the what is it? The stupendous silverfish. I think that costume is hysterical. That is so funny.
Yeah. And like he said, he was in here. He says that the whole spandex doesn't really work that well when you're overweight.
Right.
I love the part where they're just walking him off in handcuffs. It's just, what the heck?
Poor Ted. Very sad future for Ted. Makes me very sad.
Yes. It could be worse. I mean, it's not like someone shot him in the head.
Oh. Sadly, as much as I usually pretend that never happened, we are going to talk about that in a minute. I have reason. I have my reasons.
I'm sure you do. But I do like, Ted, he's retired unwittingly, so he's gained a bit of weight, he's losing his hair. You don't normally see that with a superhero, so I do like. Well, this isn't the first time he's gained weight. I know that, if I'm not mistaken, when he showed up, I think wasn't he retired or something? He showed up in the Robin series. I think he gained some weight, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it starts even earlier. It's actually in JLI. During Giffen and DeMatteis, he gains weight, and I can't remember if it was right before this annual or right after this annual, but he gains weight, and then him and Guy actually have a boxing issue where they fight each other because Guy's been making so much fun of him for his weight. And then you're right. Yeah, later on in the Robin and Birds of Prey series, he shows up again. He's not terribly overweight in those, but he's a little bit, and he's got a heart condition. And so he can't really go out and be the Blue Beetle that he wants to be. In fact, not a lot of people know this. Chuck Dixon wanted at one point Tim Drake to become Blue Beetle, to become the next Blue Beetle.
I think I heard that somewhere. Maybe it was your podcast. I'm not sure now. I've heard that somewhere.
It might. I don't know all the details of it, but I find that fascinating when I heard that. So anyway, so the whole here's the thought for you though. So I'm assuming you've read Watchmen, correct?
Oh yes.
So and I assume you know how Watchmen came to be, where Alan Moore based those characters on the Charlton characters. So the Night Owl, if I'm getting my name right, yeah, Night Owl. Night Owl is a sort of analog for Blue Beetle. So in Watchmen, which came out in 1985 or 1987, Night Owl got older and gained weight and was overweight. And so here, it's like a snake eating its own tail, because Night Owl is based on Blue Beetle. Well, Night Owl got fat and overweight and out of shape, and then now Blue Beetle gets fat and overweight and out of shape. It's like, oh wait, it's a cycle into itself. It's sort of like Rorschach and Question. The Question was the basis for Rorschach. Well, then later on, when the Question comes back, they based a lot of the Question on Rorschach. Again, snake eating its own tail over and over.
Yeah, it's comics for you.
Right. And it's very Alan Moore that something like that happened anyway, too, because it just seems like something that, even though he's probably mad about it, it seems like something he would have constructed, though, this whole crazy loop.
Yeah. He's mad about everything. But and also you can tell part of Ted's depression, I guess, is his sadness. That scene where he's digging the refrigerator, he's got a sink full of dishes, trash on the floor. He's not taking very good care of himself at this point. Yeah,
basically it looks like what Aaron's apartment would look like if Michelle left him. That's what I'm envisioning. Oh, wait, was that out loud? Oh, crap.
It was true, too. So.
Well, let's all help for everyone's sake that never happens.
If I didn't shave my head, I'd be balding. Right. So, yeah, that's all I'm missing.
Well, let's move forward to some gorgeous, gorgeous art by Kevin Maguire.
Gotta love Kevin Maguire.
So good. On the ice segment. And you were right in your description, sadly, she does become a crazy cat lady.
Sadly. I mean, I like Ice. Ice is a beautiful woman. Or as some other podcaster I listen to says, she's hot.
That guy's a sexist pig.
He is. I think that's why I admire him so much. But even as a crazy cat lady, she's still a very attractive young lady.
Yeah, very pretty. Yep.
But But as soon as she hears the guy got hit in the head, and he needs me. After all these years, he needs me.
Right.
And while I like this story, I got looking at, like I said, at the time I didn't really think about it, but looking back at it now, I've got some problems with the fact that she seems so dependent on the guy.
Yeah, it really isn't healthy. Yeah. I mean, she lives alone. She became a cat lady, and she's just waiting for her man to need her.
In 30 years ago, I didn't think about this, but looking, being a 48-year-old, got a daughter and 10-year-old daughter, I guess it does change you, because I'm looking at it now, I'm like, wow, it's kind of, for being a great character, in my opinion, I think it's kind of a disservice to her that, I know they're doing it for the laughs and just for the humor aspect is my guess, but it doesn't paint her in a good light.
So here's the stupid thing. Like, the exact same thoughts went through my head, which is a little terrifying that I thought anything similar to you, because that scares me. But so the same thought went through my head. And you know what, like, the one redeeming thing happened? Like, on the second page of her story, she's running out of the house. She's just put on an outfit, and she's running out of the house to go meet Guy, right? She runs past her mailbox, and the flag is up on her mailbox. So that I developed a whole storyline in my head from that flag being up on her mailbox. Where I'm like, well, wait a minute. Maybe she has a life. Maybe she's got some friends that she writes to every day, and she has this great correspondence back and forth, in pre-internet days. So she's writing letters, and she has a bunch of friends. I'm like, where am I going with this? What the hell? It's all it was is Kevin McGuire drew the flag up on her mailbox, But
okay, and to show the difference between me and you, I'm a cynical old man. You say she's got a lot of friends she's writing to. She, keeping correspondence. I'm thinking she's mailing out some bills.
Yeah, that's probably true.
That's
probably true. Or redeeming some, rebate for cat food. But I was desperate to try and, not make her character, the weaker character, because we don't want that advice. Now, she always was a more reserved personality, but she was still an independent woman. I mean, I don't know. It is sad to see the way that her future would have turned out. Yes.
Though, you know what? Again, thinking about it, haven't really thought too much about this because I haven't read these comics in years, but I mean, she did have kind of, if I remember correctly, she did have some sort of dependent relationship with B, it seemed to, a little bit. So maybe it's just something they're exploring even further. I don't know. Well,
it could be. And they didn't do a lot of service to her after Giffen and DeMatteis left either. They spent this whole era where she had a crush on Superman, too. I mean, it's like they just didn't know what to do with a character, with a female character who wasn't just all saucy and smart mouth. They couldn't do I don't want to use the word shy. That's not quite fair. But reserved is probably the word. Yeah, I guess. A more reserved character could still be a strong person and yet be more, not out in everybody's face. More introverted. There we go. So.
Right. Though in the writer's defense, at least in 10 years, she's still alive.
That's true. That's true. A lot of people would have put her in a fridge. Good point. Especially in the 90s. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about what actually happens to Ice in the Justice League title.
Oh, yeah, good point. Well,
that's where I was.
Well, wait. She was dead, but then, so this is Armageddon 2001, so this is the year 2001, and no, she was still dead. She didn't come back till like 2003 or 2004, I want to say.
Yeah.
So I believe that's, right before Infinity Crisis, or Infinite Crisis when I think she came back. So, yeah, okay. And then you get this great page where Waverider is thinking to himself about fire. This cracks me up. Where he's thinking about fire, and it's a butt shot too, ladies and gentlemen, too. So you're seeing a butt shot of fire, and she's also turned to the side so you can see her breasticles too. And he says, "She's so beautiful. I think of all the women heroes I've studied, I've ... admired her the most."
It's not what he was
little
thinking.
Little creeper mode there, buddy.
Yeah. I think maybe Waverider's descendant of mine. But that's another story entirely.
Yep. So Fire and Derek Robertson again. Fire and Oberon getting married. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's an unnatural pairing. Well, not unnatural. That's probably the wrong word. But
well, they've been building.
Not a pairing you would think. Not a pairing you would think of.
So the part that threw me at first, and it threw me. I've read the comic twice now, getting ready for this podcast. When Blue Beetle or Ted comes barging into the wedding, not Oberon and Fire, but it's Ice and Guy. Right. He comes barging in and yells "Fire!" It didn't process to me that he was coming in to yell at B. To me, I'm thinking, oh, someone just ran into a public building and yelled "Fire," which would have been a great joke to play off of too.
So I didn't even catch that.
Okay.
I thought I thought it was Ted yelling at fire. I didn't even think about that concept of it, which would have been funny.
Right. Should have had a bunch of people stampeding out or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but yeah, you're right. Yep. Huh. Yeah, I do like the segment where he's blaming B for his entire problem. When a lot of it comes onto his own self, his own want to get rich quick schemes, and so I think they both have a hand in Ted's downfall, if you will.
It's a clever plot twist, though, because earlier we saw Ted's downfall where he sold the license to the Blue Beetle franchise, and then we find out in Fire Story that, like, he sold it to her and didn't even know. Right. He sold it to a shell company that she was basically stabbing her own teammates in the back.
Yeah. That depends how you look at it. She says here, the contract was plain as day. For one of those get-rich-quick schemes. So, again, it's kind of who do you believe? Is it, Fire right that, it was clearly laid out and it's all Ted's fault? Or more like what you were saying, how it's a shell company and she was kind of stabbing in the back.
I think it was what she meant by it was all laid out, meaning the rights he was going to lose. I think it was still pretty secret about who it was. Like, if you were to if the Headcast Network were to make a bid to buy the right. Fire and Water Podcast Network, I think if I found out, it was a shell company who bought us, and then I found out it was you, and it screwed me over, I'd be pretty pissed. I'd be like, dude, what the hell? So yeah, I don't blame Ted in this one. Now, it's Ted's own fault for not being able to buy the franchise back or being able to license it out or whatever. He did, of course, his get-rich-quick scheme, which fell on his face. But Fire probably should have been a little more upfront and told him it was her company.
Give me just a second. I gotta call my lawyer real quick and cancel some plans I got going on.
It only costs like a Klondike bar. Don't worry. We don't have a lot of morals. That's not what we're looking for. We don't have a lot of self-worth. How's that?
Oh, morals too.
That's true. It's a different subject altogether, really.
Yeah. And again, another headline: ex-superhero arrested after attempt on model's life.
Yep.
And Blue Beetle being let out in custody. Not quite the splash page it was with Guy getting bonked, but still another front page. Just like he's really helping the Daily Planet sell the newspaper.
Right. Then we get Dan Jurgens drawing the Booster Gold segment, which is great because, Booster Gold's his character. I love seeing the Space Museum. I'm a huge, huge fan of the Space Museum. I love that whole idea from the old Mystery in Space comics. Very cool. There's a funny gag in here that I didn't get the first time I read, where Booster is running through the hall looking at all the different characters, and he's reading them out. He's going, okay, Dr. Fate, Green Arrow, Creature Commandos, Captain Martian Manhunter, Creature Commandos with a question. And I didn't get the gag there. Creature Commandos were created by J.M. DeMatteis. So that's why he slipped it in there, because he wrote the script, which I thought, that's pretty clever.
Yeah, I didn't realize he created them, so that very much explains that.
So, super fun.
Yeah, I just thought it was a jab at Creature Commandos, but
well, it probably was a little bit of both. Really, it really was. So, yep. So the time travel stuff was cute here, but and I like that they took the time to draw Tim Drake. That made me happy. That means that Damien's not remembered in the future, and Tim Drake is. That makes me very happy.
Maybe in this future there was no Damien.
Oh, that'd be lovely.
Maybe it's Waverider's fault that. No, I'm not gonna get on that horse. I really dislike Damien. I
hated him for many, 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 many years. I'm still not a huge fan of his. However, I really enjoy the current post-Rebirth Teen Titans comics and the Super Sons comics, both of which he's in, and I just enjoy the hell out of those comics.
I like them. See, to me, that it's kind of like Shia LaBeouf or James Franco. I like things that they're in, but not because they're in.
Well, I can't stand James. I can understand what you're saying there.
I said that Wizard of Oz movie. I enjoyed that movie, but I don't care for him. But that's another story entirely. So to me, that's kind of how Damien is. I enjoy Super Sons. I would like it better if it wasn't Damien.
Well, it works.
But then it'd just be Super Son.
Well, I like it because it makes me root for Jonathan that much more. Because, it's like, get that little crap. Get him!
Right. Yeah, I enjoy Super Sons mostly. It's just, whenever it gets to Damien, though, he's just too annoying for me. He's too know-it-all, too... I don't know, he's worse than... Jason Todd.
Well, sure. Yeah.
In fact, I'm hoping I'm going to start a letter campaign getting him to bring back the 900.
Oh, goodness. Well, apparently there's a storyline coming up. Apparently, I don't know when it's coming out in comparison to this, but apparently there's going to be a story in Batman where maybe we find out that Deathstroke might actually be Damian's dad instead of Bruce Wayne. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I know they just started that Deathstroke Batman crossover.
Okay. It could just be a feint as well to, just get people to buy the book. So
I wouldn't mind that. Move him over to Deathstroke. But I'm enjoying the Deathstroke book, sort of. But that's another story entirely. Anyway, moving on with the Justice League International.
Then we get into...
But
go ahead.
I do like the fact that, they learned their lesson and they locked the time bubble down. Seeing how that's flashback how Booster got back to the present, past, originally, by stealing a time bubble. Like, I was going to steal a time bubble. Oh, it's locked.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, they're not stupid.
Well, then we jump forward to the Mr. Miracle segment drawn by Joe Phillips, which I love this segment. I think this is actually my favorite segment in the book. This one and the Guy Gardner, I think, are the two best. This one's my favorite, personally. I love seeing Joe Phillips. Joe drew the Mr. Miracle book when I was reading it. Really enjoyed that. I love the idea of the Miracle Squad, because Shiloh... Did you read the old Mr. Miracle book?
Yes. I wasn't a big fan of Shiloh.
Really?
Yeah, he was all right. Again, it's one of those where I really love Scott Free, so seeing someone else come and take over the mantle, I just didn't care for him as much. Same way with Blue Beetle. I really love Ted Kord, so I can't get behind Jaime Reyes because, again, my love is for Ted Kord. So I think it's not that Shiloh was a bad character. It's just I was more of a fan of Scott Free, Mr. Miracle.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that always did rub me wrong, that I didn't like the idea that Scott was giving up the identity. But the fact was, the way that series went, Shiloh was always the Mr. Miracle apprentice. He never really became the Mr. Miracle because it was always still Scott Free and Barda, which was just so much fun. So I love this whole thing here that he's expanded, and this is a very logical extension of that too, where he's expanded from Shiloh to the whole Miracle Squad, and everyone has a slightly different costume, which is really nice. It's a nice touch. So and of course I love anything with Barda is freaking hysterical. She's got this great line about how how she's doing all these multiple things. She says, "Well, we're even though I may look the part, I'm not Superwoman. There's a few bits here." And there's this whole funny back and forth thing about where Scott's wants to break Blue Beetle out of jail, and he has all these ridiculous scheme upon scheme upon scheme, and she just keeps shooting him down. It's hilarious.
Go home, let me handle it. But let me do this. No, just go home, let me handle it.
Too funny.
Well, going back a step, when Scott was talking, he was introducing Shiloh. He's like, let Shiloh stand as an example, people. As extraordinary as he is now, extraordinary. He was once the worst excuse for an escape artist the world has ever seen. Right, the worst Hey! To me, that's very much given DeMatteis humor.
Yeah, that's it. That's DeMatteis' magic and scripting, absolutely.
So, it's just fantastic.
Yep. Dug this one. That's, again, probably my favorite segment. And then we get into... What do we get next? Oh, General Glory.
The General Glory one.
And drawn by Ty Templeton. Hot dog. Love me some.
Like I said, he gets the Justice League book. Didn't he draw the Batman Adventures? Or am I
if I remember correctly, and I may have this a little wrong, but I want to say it was Mike Parabeck and Ty Templeton would switch off. Because both of them had this wonderful style. This very, animated series kind of style. So I want to say it was both Parabeck and Templeton. But just fantastic artists. Great artists. I love the face here on Joe, like in the first page in the bottom panel, where he's just kind of like got a crap-eating grin. He's like, love that.
Hey, go ahead and pile it on. I'm not buying it.
And the way Max just totally plays him with all the American patriotism and stuff is so funny. You can just hear, the anthem coming up behind, playing behind Max. So good.
Yeah. He jumps up. Joe jumps up on the bed. Lady Liberty, here my place. He's standing there like a crazy old man in his hospital gown, standing on his bed. And then he transforms into General Glory. It's just a great page.
And if you're not familiar with General Glory, and good chance a lot of people aren't unless they read this era, he's kind of like a Captain America analog where he's all pro-patriotism and stuff like that, except in this case, there's a little bit of Shazam that goes on because he's transforming from a regular guy into this amazing hulking body. And then the third part is he's sort of like an out-of-step grandpa. who doesn't know when his stories are going on too long and tells stories that are sort of meandering and that are interesting to him about the old days.
Very much so.
It's a fun character. Now, did you notice this little quirk? I didn't notice it until the second time around. You mentioned that Maxwell Lord convinces the UN to reinstate the Justice League. You said that in your recap. Right. Actually, I don't think that's what happened. Because if you look at it, Max is giving a speech, right? Everybody looks bored. Everyone looks like they in that panel, bottom left panel. Like one guy's got his fingers on his face, like one woman's like scratching her ear or something. One guy's coughing or yawning. Like they're not paying any attention to him. The minute General Glory says, all he says is "Hi, folks." General Glory says "Hi, folks," and suddenly everyone is applauding and cheering and screaming. I think it's General Glory that everyone got excited about, not Max's speech.
You know, you're right. Now that I'm looking at it again, re-looking what I wrote in my recap on it, because
you said Max convinced him. I was paying attention.
Yeah,
I listened.
Well, one of us needs to. But yeah, no, it probably is more. And see, part of the reason I said I gave Max the credit for it because I said he's the one that brought General Glory into it, and they bought it. It just, to me, it seems, even though General Glory was the reason they bought into it, I still give Max the credit because he's the one that he knew he had to have General Glory to do it. Yeah, I don't think his speech really looking at had anything to do with the actual. Because, like you say, they're falling asleep in his speech.
I mean, the speech is good. It's well written, but the art demonstrates that everyone's bored. So it's almost like, once General Glory shows up, everyone's like, okay, let's do this. So, I don't know. Maybe that's one of his powers.
Patriotism.
Right?
Patriotism.
And then it leads into everybody with the Ernie haircuts. Oh, my goodness.
And as I talked about in the recap, the Ernie is the DC's version of Bucky, if you will.
So, all right, so you're thinking that one's Crimson Fox. So, again, we've got Booster, Beetle, and Beetle's back in his Beetle costume, but he's overweight. You got Fire, you got Ice, Guy Gardner, Aquaman, and then these two female characters that we don't know. Now, the one in purple, it's bugging the heck out of me. Like, I know that costume. Is it, like, Amethyst maybe or something? Or
is that, see, Amethyst is a
right, I know. But that purple costume just looks so familiar to me, and I can't place it. Same
way, yeah. That looks like Crimson Fox outfit, I believe, across from her, but I'm not 100% positive on it.
Well, it could very well be. I mean, it is funny. This is sort of a typical thing, especially of this era, well, in comics in general. Like, whenever you project to the future, the same people are on the team. This is 10 years later. Yeah, folks, by 2001, the Justice League International era had added 1 million more members. That whole entire era collapsed. In fact, and then you got Justice League? You got JLA from Grant Morrison, right? So you get by that point, by 2001, you've got Grant Morrison's JLA, which is like, wow, this is amazing. And even Extreme Justice was gone by this point. Anyway, so 2001, you had Grant Morrison's Justice League, which may have been written by Mark Waid at that point. But either way, completely different setup. And yet here they're trying to say basically, well, 10 years from now, the league will basically be the same. We'll throw in Aquaman. What the hell? And two people.
Well, me and John talked about in the Detective or Batman annual, and like me and Mike talked about in the Justice League annual. Yeah, it was pretty much the same thing. Yeah, the writers, when they projected 10 years in the future, things were pretty much the same as they were now as far as looks.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Now, here's the interesting thing. Okay, so we talked about 2001, right? Okay, so right.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Hey listeners, this is Aaron from the future, the past, something. This is me. So while editing this, I decided to take that page that me and Shag was talking about with the two mysterious women, and I threw it up on the Unite DC Comics project, a group that I'm on, because I knew that if anyone would have the answers, my buddies over there would. So I threw it up, and I would say less than a day later, it was next morning, my buddy Lawrence Lee from over there. Lawrence Lee, he told us who it was. He said it was from Booster's group, The Conglomerate. It was a couple characters known as Echo and Vapor. I know I read those comics with The Conglomerate in it. It was like in the Just League Quarterly and some other books. But, yeah, I couldn't remember them for the life of me. But, yeah, thank you, Lawrence Lee. So, yeah, those two females, I thought maybe one of them might have been Crimson Fox. and the one that the costume that Shag recognized but didn't know. Again, that was Echo and Vapor. Once again, thank you very much, Lawrence Lee, for giving us that information. I knew that one of you smart people there on the Unite DC Comics project would have the answer. All right, I'm done talking for now. I'm going to go ahead and send this back to past Aaron and past Shag.
Because the more you know.
So 2001, Grant Morrison, Justice League, etc., etc., etc. But by 2005, maybe 2006, maybe as late as 2008, I don't know. This crew was actually back together in Justice League Generation Lost. You know, this is not exact crew, but a team similar to this was in Generation Lost, a big miniseries where the Justice League was back together. That's not even counting the formerly known as the Justice League, and I can't believe it's not the Justice League. So this group does get back together, actually, ironically, just without the haircuts. So to some extent, they were kind of right about the future, which is crazy to think that.
Well, I do like on this page here where we're talking about, they're talking about, we could have done without the Ernie haircuts, and guys like Ernie haircuts, well, they're Guy Gardner haircuts.
Right.
Because he's probably still the nice guy, but even then he's still thinking about himself.
Yeah, well, he's reading a Macrame Made Easy in Home and Garden magazine, so yeah. And that's something they revealed later Justice League issues was, supposedly Guy Gardner's signature haircut was a tribute to Ernie, which was General Glory's sidekick, which is a funny retcon.
So do you recall at this point, had they announced it, had they done that issue by this point?
I'm sure they must have. I think the Ernie stuff was right in the earliest parts of the General Glory story, I think.
Okay, it's been 20, 30 years since I read those.
Long time.
I remember now. I haven't read those since they first came out. I can't remember exactly time frame wise when it happened.
Right. So I'll find out in a few years on my podcast. Right now, I don't have that answer.
So you don't know who those two in for sure are either?
No. Again, the one in purple, I know that costume. I just can't place it. Although it could just be something similar, but it just looks very, very much like something. The other one I have no idea, but Crimson Fox is a darn good guess on that one.
No, she's not speaking, so we can't say she has a horrible French accent.
Right.
Or not, so.
And they may have just been created just for fun as well, so you never know.
It's possible, but yeah, I agree with you that pink purplish outfit, whatever, does look a little familiar. I just can't place who it is.
Right. And again, I might be thinking of for all I know, I might be thinking of a Marvel character. I'm not sure. So.
Moving our story along, we get Waverider visiting Max at the hospital.
Yep. We get that segment drawn by Linda Medley, who I don't know, but it's a cute segment with him on Kahui. Now, here's the interesting thing. This is the part that's out of order. Because every other story here has been in basically chronological order, but here, Booster and Max together to go back and get to Fire. So basically what this is saying is this story must take place before the General Glory one. Because then Max and General Glory put the JLI back together. So this one must take place before that.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so.
Now, touching Max to figure out whether Max is the evil monarch, again, 2001, well, jump forward 4 years, and Max was pretty darn evil in 2005. Just saying.
What you talking about, Willie?
I play it that way as well, but in the realm of comics, you could say Maxwell Lord was pretty much an evil. Forgive my language. Year 2005, not too far off 2001.
No, I agree. Sadly, and he was always kind of I don't want to say evil. He was always more. I can't think of the quite right word. He's not a bad guy per se, but he always had his own way of doing things.
Yeah, well, he was a good guy, but he was. I guess I got to figure out how to phrase that. I'm struggling as well. He was the good guy you love to hate.
Yeah, I mean, he would use his powers selfishly. He wasn't, you know.
He was the antagonist on their own team. So,
yeah.
You know what? All right, so I'm going to expand this a little further. So let's think about this. Okay, so the whole deal with Waverider, right? Everyone talks about Armageddon in 2001. Okay, keep in mind, folks, Waverider's not from the year 2001. He's actually from 50 years in the future, which would be 50 years in the future from 1991. So he's from the year 2041. So Waverider's from 2041. And what we know is that whoever becomes monarch murders all the other superheroes in the year 2001. Well, again, Max went around killing a bunch of people in 2005. So maybe Max is monarch.
Maybe he misread the situation. And
right. Just saying.
Yeah. Well, I've got comments on that later on in the series.
I'm sure you do. Yes, I'm sure you do. A lot to discuss on that topic, I'm sure. Oh, you know what else is interesting too? Here when he touches Max, Max is on death's door after being shot, and I hadn't thought about this, and this will come up more, I guess, when I do the podcast and I get to this point, because this was a big plot line through Breakdowns, was Max being shot, or at least leading up to Breakdowns. Max, the same sort of thing happened to Max before. In the first 12 issues, he gets shot by Mrs. Wutenhofer. And then the computer stitches him back together. And then issue 12, he destroys the evil computer. And Max ends up in the hospital dying from gunshot wounds. And it's like, oh, we've kind of done this once before.
Recurring theme.
I guess so, yeah.
I guess that's why later on he went to the other end of the game.
Maybe he did. Maybe he did.
But I do like when they're on the plane headed back and they're, Booster Gold's talking to him about the future and what do they need to do, and wow, miniskirts are bad. Down. Sorry, but the fashions where I come from are just boring.
I love that part too.
I love these little outbursts, like it's just hilarious.
Yep, too funny. And if as I seem to recall, the Space Museum, the stories I've seen, the ladies were always dressed pretty provocatively. So I don't know that Booster knows what he's talking about with these future fashions. So just saying.
Well, maybe some timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly stuff is messing with his brain, possibly.
Or maybe the stuff went out of fashion, I guess. Maybe that's always in the future. Maybe there wasn't. Maybe everything was skimpy, and then something went out of fashion, and Booster's upset about it. I don't know. Or
maybe something Booster did in the past changed the future.
Oh. His lecherous behavior caused women to cover up more, is what you're saying?
Possibly, it's a possibility. Wow. You never know.
That sends so many wrong messages. So many wrong messages. That's just terrible. You're the worst.
Thank you. I've heard that before. In fact, I heard that on my own show. It's going to be a habit. Yeah, I like how when they're talking with B, we don't see any of that. It's all behind a closed door. Yeah. No, I will. I absolutely will. Max, is your nose bleeding? No, Booster.
Right. That was so funny. And then he convinces her to give over part of her company, too. It's such a Max.
That's a headache sometimes.
Such a Max move.
Very much so. Like, oh look, D. Oh, look, dear. B signed over a petroleum for a company to Max. That's nice, sweetie.
Well, then you jump forward a bit, you get another full-page newspaper ad for Deadly Planet. No, newspaper headline, Max Lord at Death's Door. And then very graphically, they have a picture of him in a hospital bed on a breather. Like, wow, would really Daily Planet run that on the front page? That's pretty gruesome. That's like ghoulish.
Depends on who's running, I guess, in 1990. Oh, that's 1991.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was current time, so yeah, I don't know. That's
a little ghoulish, but I mean, it's effective for the comic.
Going back a couple pages real quick with Guy and Ice. Did you notice on the refrigerator, apparently, Guy and Ice have children?
Oh. It does say Daddy.
There's a picture of Guy. This is Daddy.
Well, then I take that back. The story wouldn't be out of order. Then it would. Oh, geez. What that means then is that Max gets General Glory to reform the JLI, and then Max quits everything and goes and becomes a beachcomber? That doesn't really make a lot of sense.
I'm sure that wasn't meant to be talked about on a podcast 30 years later, but yeah, as I'm reading through here, I noticed that Daddy of Guy Gardner. I'm like, that's not done by an infant. That's done by... Yeah,
it's like a 4 or 5 year old.
Yeah, at least. So...
Yeah. I mean, or an Aaron Moss, whichever.
I wish I could draw that good. But yeah, it just got me thinking. I wonder, I've got to wonder. I think I'm looking too much into it. I'm sure it's not their intention, but...
Right.
But yeah, I wonder, is it out of order like you were talking originally, or is it just several years taking place between? I don't know. But anyways, moving on from there, because again, so yeah, we get the last framing sequence here where Waverider's looking at the paper and vanishes.
So, all right, so the greasy-headed guy with the mustache and the long hair that he's in the sunglasses, like that looks like every dude Keith Giffen draws in the background of a panel, or like that guy from Amazing Man, too. Looks like the guy from the Amazing Man as well. But either way.
Yeah. And then, here at the very bottom where, as I've had no synopsis, that, it's Continued Wave, Hawk and Dove Annual 2, and Just Like Europe 3. They skip a whole bunch of titles.
They really did. And the interesting thing, though, is those two annuals are kind of sort of pretty important. Some pretty important characters are in those two annuals for the future of the Armageddon saga.
Yeah, so it's a way of saying you don't need to read the rest of these books in between. The rest of them are just filler. These we really need to read.
Well, I don't even know that you have to read them, but I'm just saying there's some important characters.
I don't remember who was editing Hawk and Dove at the time. I don't think it was Andy Heffler, though.
I don't think so.
No, sometimes like in letter columns and things, the next issue stuff, they'll talk about some of the other books they work on.
Oh, yeah, it could be.
I don't know. It'd be interesting to find out who put that in there and why they selected those two other than the obvious reasons.
Right, right.
So overall, skipping we'll talk about in a few minutes, the ending of the whole series. What are your real thoughts of the annual itself?
I love the concept. I mean, if you got to do a team book, which is very difficult to do, especially with this framing, idea of like what's everybody's future, rather than doing all these little individual stories of everyone's different futures, it's really one sort of thematic story. And so having Waverider pop in and check each person as in their journey of the story is pretty cool. I thought it was done very nicely.
I agree. Like I say, with a team book, sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out how to handle a team book when you're looking at if you could do the whole team in the future. But I do like how they handled it here. They showed little vignettes of each of the members and eventually led them up to becoming a team again. So I do thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of like the years of annuals where they did the Elseworld annuals, where they did the Legends of the Dead Earth annuals, and just thematically feels a little the same, where it's like everything's falling apart, and here's how it all comes back together. Yeah, it's nice.
Very much so. Well, do you have any other thoughts on the Armageddon 2001? As far as like I said, we'll get to that in a few minutes here, but as far as the series up to this point, and you said you read this when they first came out, right?
Yeah, I read all of them as they were coming out. Yep.
I know you talked about before you were working at a comic shop. Was that this point, or was that after this? When you did
just after this. In fact, I'd have to look at the release date of when Armageddon 2001 number 2 came out, because I may have. I'm trying to remember. 91. So I started in November. Yeah, I started in November 91 is when I started working for the comic book store.
Oh, okay.
So it's either the second one had probably come out. I think it was a summer crossover, if I remember right. But either way, it was shortly right after this is when I started working at the comic shop.
And just to let you know, I envy you. That would have been one of my dream jobs, is working at a comic shop, just because I'm around comics all day long.
Hands down, it is my most favorite job I've ever had. And I've typically loved the jobs I have, but that was absolute best, because all day long, your job is to come in, your job is to sit there while people come in to buy something they love. Because, if any business you work at, there's a good chance where you're working, people purchase that service or item because they have to.
Right.
Like, look at a grocery store. People don't go into a grocery store because they want to. They go to a grocery store because they got to freaking eat.
Right.
People don't call Comcast because they have to or they want to. They do it because they have to. So a comic book store is a luxury item. They go there because they want to. And they come in and they love it. And it's just full of joy and happiness. And you might sit there and bicker with someone about who's stronger, Thor or the Hulk or Superman, whatever. And it's just fun. And you're getting paid to do it. It's like the greatest job ever.
Well, if you're not super busy, I'm sure you do. Being a comic fan, you get to talk to these people and you get other people's opinions and thoughts on things, and you get a chance to geek out.
It's awesome.
Regardless of what your home life's like. And if you don't have anyone home to talk to about comic books, so I'm going to work and I'm going to talk about comic books. Woo!
Right. Now, the only downside was we also sold role-playing games. And while I love role-playing games, I don't want to hear about your character. I'm sorry. That's why people make T-shirts that say, I don't want to hear about your character. It's because somebody comes into the comic shop and then they want to spend 40 minutes telling you why their dark elf is different than everybody else's dark elf. And you're like, I don't freaking care, bro. But you can't say that.
Right.
You just got to smile and go, uh-huh. Oh, there's more? Okay, that's great.
So we're going to want to talk to you about my high elf I just created for a D&D I'm playing.
That would be awesome. Hang on, let me put the headset down. You go ahead and start talking, though.
Oh, fantastic. I
love role-playing games. I do.
Yes.
I love role-playing games. I'm in one right now. I just know that where to draw the line as far as what I'm going to tell people about the story.
Yeah. It's interesting, knowing other people play, but getting to the nitty-gritty of it sometimes. Okay, that's interesting. I'm not there. It doesn't really matter to me.
Right. It's my buddy Siskoid from the Fire and Water Podcast Network described it best. Describing your role-playing campaign to someone else is like trying to describe a dream. It is interesting to the person who's telling the story. The other person on the other end's like, I don't really care that much. Okay.
speaking of which, though, I don't know if you've heard podcast For Whom the Die Rolls.
No, what's that?
It's Adam Worth from the Bad Advice Show.
Okay.
Him and some other guys, Thomas Stanley and some other their friends. They role play. They're playing a D&D game, and they're recording what they do, and then they're playing as a podcast. Each of their adventures.
Oh,
I think it's really interesting.
I've heard there's some podcasts out there where people actually role playing on the show, and that's a really cool idea. Neat.
Yeah, that's For Whom the Die Rolls. Yeah, it's a very interesting show. I mean, like I say, just getting back into D&D myself after umpteen years of not role playing, it's very interesting. I'm enjoying that podcast also.
Cool.
But
always like to hear about other cool podcasts.
So if you have time, check that one out. But that's another story entirely.
I think I've said everything and more.
Well, real quick. Well, I say real quick. We'll give me a drink of water and a beer or something. You go ahead and talk. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you on the inner tubes?
Oh, geez. Okay. Well, the quickest, fastest place is to head over to the fireandwaterpodcast.com. All of our shows are there. It's a network that my buddy and I started. His name's Rob. He's not really my buddy. I just say that, though, because, whatever. It just makes people feel better. Anyway, Rob and I started the network on talking about Aquaman and Firestorm, and it just grew from there. We've got a lot of other people that have joined us, a lot of partners. We've got shows on just about everything you can imagine in the realm of comics. Personally, I do a show on, again, Aquaman and Firestorm. I also do one on Who's Who, the definitive directory of the DC Universe. I'm involved with one that's about role-playing called Hero Points. I have my Justice League International. Hero Points? In fact, I don't know when this is being recorded versus being released, but I'm recording a Hero Points episode next week.
Oh, right,
so,
this
it'll be the first one in
next week, it'll
be the first one in like 6 months, but yeah, we're doing it. We did three or four whole episodes last year. Now shut up. Anyway,
and the only reason I give you a hard time about because I really love that podcast also because I love the
we do too.
DC role playing game. That's when I played big time back in the early '90s. So I just love hearing you guys talk about that.
We love it too. It's just it's hard to sit there and read a whole module and get it done and really do it justice and find time to fit it in amongst everything else. Because most of my time, again, is filled up with Aquaman and Firestorm, Who's Who, and Justice League International, the Bwahaha podcast, where we are going through, or I should say I am going through, the guest each episode, the Giffen and DeMatteis era of Justice League, starting with issue 1, going all the way up to the end of Breakdowns, and beyond a little bit. So that's, and I'm on, Digest Cast, where we talk about the wonderful little digest comics you can get with DC and Marvel stuff, and a lot of other shows I pop in and out on. So, yep. But the best place is fireandwaterpodcast.com.
Well, let me second that. I really love all your shows. As we talked about previously, early before we started recording, I listen to almost all your shows. Again, because we have a lot of the same interests. I love Firestorm. I love role-playing. I like giving Aquaman a bad time. But, real quick, I'm on a Facebook comic collecting group, and here, not too long ago, someone got a bunch of comics. I forget which one it was now. They got like a whole stack of the same comic, and they were trying to decide what to do with them. And someone recommended we'll give them out as Halloween gifts or for Halloween.
Nice.
And I mean, I know, a podcasting buddy of mine, Shag, he hands out comics at Halloween time. And just to let you know, a guy on there named Josh Poffler. He was, my buddy, podcasting buddy Shag does that. He's like, is that Shag from the Fire and Water podcast? Oh, yeah. That's so cool, man. Have fun. Tell him I said hi, and that he said issue 29 of Firestorm was his first book, and he loved it. And he knows that you think that covers Hideous. When I mentioned your name, he's like, Shag from the Fire and Water? Yeah, that's Shag. Wow, that's really cool. And I asked this when we were supposed to record a couple weeks ago. He's like, that's really cool. Tell him I said hi, and I love Firestorm. So I'm like, I just want to pass that on to you.
What a crazy small world. Well, dude, do me a favor. Shoot me that guy's name. I'll say hey to him. So that's fantastic. That's so cool.
So, but yeah, tell me.
We'll meet another match head.
There you go. It's always a good thing. But, I guess that'll do it for this segment. Be back with us next month. We have another segment. I talk about the next issue of the Armageddon 2001. I believe it's the Superman or the Action Comics annual. I'll do it. Stay tuned for the commercials, and I'll be right back with you guys. Head Speaks will be back after these important messages.
I'm really excited for 2016. In fact, I think we should record a promo about all the changes to the Fire and Water Podcast Network happening this year. What do you think, Rob?
That's a great idea. We can mention the new folks joining the network and all the shows. I can talk about how we'll continue with our Aquaman and Firestorm show, and I want to be sure to plug my movie show, the Film and Water Podcast. What about you, Ryan?
Oh, I think we should definitely record a promo. I'll mention how the Secret Origins podcast is joining the Fire and Water Network, and then I'll introduce my newly relaunched shows, Give Me Those Star Wars and Power of Fishnets, the Black Canary and Zatanna podcast. Sound good to you, Chris?
Absolutely. I'll mention the show I record with my lovely wife, Cindy, Supermates, the husband and wife Geekcast. We should probably also mention the Power Records podcast Rob and I do, too. What about you, Siskoid?
Well, sure. I can talk about my ensemble show, the Lonely Hearts Romance Comics Podcast, and my new upcoming shows about the DC Comics crossover event, Invasion, and yes, oh, hot move. Shag, you think we should mention Hero Points, the most occasional DC Heroes role-playing podcast? Sure, why not? And I can talk about Who's Who, the definitive podcast of the DC Universe, and mention my new upcoming show, Justice League International, Wahaha podcast. Now, here's what I'm thinking. When we record, I'm fine being the first person talking. I can explain all the changes to the
Wait a minute. Why do you get to start the promo? I'm just as much of a part of this as you are. It was my idea to create the Fire and Water podcast back in 2011. I should start off this promo.
I kind of think it should be one of the new voices who kick off the promo. It'll shock the listener into attention if it's not Rob or Shag.
Cindy and I make up 2 people in the network. Plus, ladies first, so we should be the first people talking on the promo.
Ben voyons donc. You have
What?
got
What?
French cannot be the language of the Fire and Water Network.
Enough! Stop it. You're like boys with toys. Let's just make this simple. We can tell the folks at home the Fire and Water Podcast Network is growing in 2016. Several new shows are joining the network. We'll have a new dedicated website, a Twitter account, and Facebook page, and folks will be able to subscribe to each individual show or all of them. See, now was that so hard?
the Fire and Water Podcast Network. Available soon through iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and fireandwaterpodcast.com.
Seriously, Shag, you had to get the last word, didn't you?
Hi, gang. It's Adam Worth from The Bad Advice Show, and it's official. Critics, fellow podcasters, and fans alike have voted, and The Bad Advice Show has won the 2016 award for Best New Podcast. Detractors called us the most dangerous show in podcasting, but thanks to you, the fans, this little podcast that could has shown them all. To help celebrate, our podcasting colleagues from around the world have sent us in congratulatory messages, like this gem from Aaron the Head Moss of the Head Speaks Network.
Yeah, I enjoy listening to the Bad Advice podcast when I'm going to the bathroom. Because, you know, when in Rome.
But wait, there's more.
This is Ryan Daly from the Secret Origins podcast. My ex-wife's divorce attorney calls the Bad Advice Show a gold mine.
And still others have sent contributions in to show their reverence.
So we're going to record the next episode of the Negative One podcast in a second, right, Matt?
Yeah.
All right. Did you hear that we got a new podcast on the network?
No, I heard that we just adopted some bullshit that no one's going to listen to.
Yeah, that sounds about right. It's called the Bad Advice Show, and it really is shit.
Is it a bad advice show?
Bad Advice Show.
Do I have to?
Yes!
Hello, this is Gene Hendricks from the Two True Freaks Network.
Louder and more natural.
I would just like to tell everyone that the Bad Advice Show is a wonderful podcast, and everyone should listen to it. Can I have my dog back now?
You can find The Bad Advice Show wherever fine podcasts are downloaded. So search for us and subscribe now so that you too can say, I was into The Bad Advice Show before it went mainstream.
The Bad Advice Show is a great podcast, as long as you hate yourself. And now back to Head Speaks. Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed those commercials. Those are some podcasts I love listening to, so I figured you'd enjoy listening to it. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on with today's show. Carry on with it. Up next is a brand new segment. It's called Behind the Podcast. What is this? Kind of like Behind the Music. It's a behind the look at podcasters about how they do, as my first guest is about to say, how the sausage is made. A little bit behind how they do their podcast, how they got started, their personal life a little bit, things like that. What is this segment started, and I'll talk a little bit about it during the actual segment. But on the 40th episode of the Bad Advice Show, my buddy Diamond Adam Worth, he wanted to do something a little different for that episode. He wanted to do an episode called Behind the Podcast, where he wanted someone to interview him, interview style, and get some behind the scenes stuff. So he turned to me, because everyone's turned him down, I'm assuming, but no. He turned to me and asked me to help him out with it, so I kindly stepped forward, and he gave me a list of questions. He told me to go off from there if I need to. So I interviewed him, and as I said, it was his 40th episode. He released it, and one of his buddies, Thomas Stanley, who's another podcaster for the Negative One podcast, and he has a podcast called For Whom the Die Roll that I talked to Shag about earlier. Thomas sent me a message and said, hey, that was a pretty good, show. He's like, have you thought about doing another show like that, just doing a show on the regular, interviewing people? It's a good idea. I would enjoy doing that. I enjoyed that episode, but I don't have the time. I've got 4 podcasts already. I was doing a Krypton podcast, but I had to step away just because of time, not having enough time in the day. So I don't have time for another podcast. But I've been thinking about that. I enjoy doing that. I would like to do, because it's a good way to talk with other people, get their stories out there, and that way listeners that listen to the podcast can tune in and find out about the podcasts they love, about the podcasters, a little behind the scenes that we don't normally get to. Because normally whenever, and again, some podcasts are different, some are a little more realistic, if you will. Others put on a performance. But this way we get behind all that and see the person behind the podcast and learn a little bit about them. But I'm like, you know what? I don't have time for another show, but what if I include it as a segment on Head Speaks? That way, if I have time to do one, if I can talk to somebody, I can record a segment, throw it into an episode, and there. If I don't have time, well, I won't have that segment that episode. It's not like it's a new podcast that someone's waiting every month or week or whatever it's supposed to be coming out. So, there was born, and so let's take one more step back. So I threw a message to Diamond Adam Worth, since it was his idea to begin with, and I asked him, are you doing anything with this? Do you mind if I do something? He said, no, my blessings. Go for it, Brotherhead. Run with it. So, there was born my newest segment for my show, Behind the Podcast. I will release these when I can. It depends on who I can get to speak with me, the time constraints, all that good stuff. But hopefully I get to talk to a lot of new people like this, but I'm going to start out with people I know, mostly other comic book type podcasters that I talk with already, and we'll go from there. If you're a podcaster and you want to be in this segment, feel free to send me an email. Send it to behindthepodcast@headspeaks.com, and I will hook up with you and we'll get you going too. So, enough preamble. Let's go ahead and start this new segment with a bumper. Behind the Podcast. And so for my very first guest on my inaugural section for Behind the Podcast, I'm bringing in, I think I make some jokes about him and make fun of him, but you know what? I'm going to be a little serious right now. I've talked about this before. My very first guest on this is, as I've said before, one of my podcasting mentors. When I started listening to podcasts, I started listening to Kevin Smith's podcast, and from there I wanted to find something that I enjoy. As I said, everywhere, my 2 favorite characters are Firestorm and the Atom. I couldn't find a good Atom podcast, but I found one called Fire and Water podcast, where they talk about Firestorm and Aquaman. Firestorm being one of my favorite characters. I started listening, and I heard this gentleman here. I'll introduce you to the Irredeemable Shag. Hey, Shag.
Well, hey, Aaron. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate this.
I appreciate you doing this with me and being my first official guest on here. What this is Behind the Podcast. We're just going to get a behind-the-scenes look at the Irredeemable Shag in his home life. where my camera's in. Oh, no, okay, I don't have the money for that. But
in his natural habitat.
So let's get started with Shag. Why don't you tell us about what shows do you have? Your main show. Well, let's stick with that because you've got so many.
Okay, sure. The main show is currently called, and I say that specifically because what we can talk about in a minute. It's called Aquaman and Firestorm, the Fire and Water Podcast. That is the main show that is sort of the flagship show of our podcast network. Now, my other main show would then be Justice League International Blah Ha Ha Podcast, which is where I go through and do an index show with the J.M. DeMatteis and Keith Giffen era of Justice League.
And so for your main, the Fire and Water show, how did you come up with that idea? Whose idea was that to begin with? What was the origins behind it?
Well, my podcasting life partner is Rob Kelly. And Rob, for many years, did a blog called the Aquaman Shrine. Very well known. Tons of people read it. It was huge. I was inspired by the Aquaman Shrine, decided to start one on my favorite character, which was Firestorm. So I started the Firestorm fan blog. Not nearly as popular as Rob's or as well written, but it was out there. So, and I have this thing where I love to build communities. I love to build communities of friends, podcasters, bloggers, whatever. And so I would start reaching out to various bloggers and say, like, hey guys, you're doing Aquaman and I'm doing Firestorm, and this guy over here is doing Martian Manhunter and this guy over here is doing Green Arrow. Let's all cross over our blog on the same day, because crossovers are big in comic books. Let's do a crossover ourselves. I mean, and I wasn't the person who invented this idea. I'm not claiming that, but I'm just saying I'd love to do those kinds of events. And so we would do these blog crossovers. Well, we all got to kind of know each other. We started to build a community. And then Rob calls me up out of the blue one day and says, hey, I'm thinking about doing a podcast, but I don't want to do it myself or do it alone. I mean, he had this idea to do an Aquaman podcast. He knew I loved Aquaman as well, but he wanted to do some sort of partnership idea with somebody else. So, and he had heard me on another podcast, and so it became Aquaman and Firestorm, and it was his idea to start with. So it really grew out of our blogs, which neither one of us are even doing anymore.
So, is that your first foray into podcasting? Is doing the Fire and Water?
No, not at all, actually. It was another buddy of mine, probably 2003, I think is when I started podcasting, maybe. A buddy of mine named John Boutel had this idea to start a podcast network called the I almost stumbled over the name, The Unique Geek, which was the brand's still around. Mainly what they do now is pre-shows for the Dragon Con convention. If you ever go to the Dragon Con convention, you should definitely listen to the Unique Geek podcast. They do this thing called 50 Days of Dragon Con, leading up to Dragon Con every year, where they interview all of the different people involved with Dragon Con, like the directors of this track and director of this track, and give you security and all these different folks. And it's a great primer to get ready for Dragon Con. It's really cool. But back in its infancy, it was just a bunch of idiots sitting around talking about whatever they felt like. It was very chaotic. We were all tripping over each other. We were all kind of figuring out what we were doing as we were going. That was about the point where I figured out, put a microphone in front of me. I'm a jerk. Okay. And that's where the irredeemable side of me first came to be, was through these podcasts. So we did the Unique Geek for a long time. Actually, that's where I met when I met Michael Bailey at Dragon Con. We invited him to participate in the Unique Geek. So he actually came on, and he was in some of these early episodes of the Unique Geek. That was his first podcasting experience as well, by the way. And then Michael Bailey launched Views from the Long Box, and I did a couple episodes of his show where we actually talked about Who's Who, and that's where Rob Kelly heard me on Michael Bailey's Views from the Long Box, and that's how we ended up with the Fire and Water.
Oh, very interesting. So when you first started doing the,
I love how nice you are. Like, very interesting. Actually, not really at all. I know, but you were the fool who asked me these questions.
Yeah, why did I get into these positions? Anyway, no, that's very. I know you've heard you talk about the Unique Geek before, but I didn't realize that was your first. That's what got you into the whole podcasting game, as it were.
Yep.
So yeah, you see, Fire and Water was your first actual podcast that you and Rob started. What was your vision when you guys started the show? When you guys started doing the podcast, did you guys envision? Because now you have a whole network and you have a dozen different shows.
Right. Well, where we are now was not at all where we thought we'd end up being. In fact, when we started the podcast, we always said that the blogs were the center of our main fandom. We wanted the blogs to be the center, and the podcast was just additional. In fact, we kind of hoped the podcast would sort of attract some attention to the blogs. That was really the point. Because when we started the podcast right when the New 52 was launching, and both Aquaman and Firestorm were getting their own series, so we felt like, oh, this is perfect. You know, both are getting their own ongoing series. Neither one of them had one in years, and it was a great opportunity to, you know, talk about this stuff. And very quickly, it changed and morphed, and the blogs became less interesting to us. The podcast became more interesting to us. And so the vision really changed. So the vision was to help the blogs initially. And then later on, the vision became, once we started doing ancillary shows like Who's Who, we had this idea. We're like, you know what? I really wish people could listen to Who's Who. Could choose to just listen to Who's Who and not have to listen to Fire and Water. Like they could choose them independently. And that started to blossom the network idea.
So is that the main reason that the blogs have went away for the most part? Is that you guys lost interest in it, or is it just you don't have enough time for them?
Well, that really addresses your next question about what's different about how we thought it would turn out. Truthfully, this isn't something I like saying publicly necessarily, but we're not real impressed with the way Aquaman and Firestorm have been handled by DC in recent years.
I agree with you.
And now it's not necessarily fair to say that about Aquaman, because Aquaman has gotten a lot of press. You know, he's had some great runs in his series. Some of Jeff Johns' issues were amazing. You know, Dan Abnett's issues were amazing. Jeff Parker's issues were amazing. But the whole idea of taking Aquaman into the Savage mode, it's not Rob's favorite. In fact, the Peter David era is not a favorite era of Rob's, and that's kind of the direction they're going. Firestorm, I'm a little frustrated because DC can't figure out what to do with him. You know, he's bigger than ever because he's on Justice League Unlimited, or is that what it's called? No, Justice League Action. I'm sorry, Justice League Action, and he's on. He was on Legends of Tomorrow. I mean, more. Well, it was a guy named Firestorm.
Yeah, that's my own personal issue with that.
And I think both of us agree, though, that was Professor Stein stepped off the page.
Very much so.
That was amazing. Amazing representation of Professor Stein, who's my favorite character in the whole thing. But so I haven't been real thrilled about it. Now, the other thing is we could look at it and say, all right, well, Aquaman, when Rob started the blog, Aquaman was dead. Literally. Right. Arthur Curry was dead. And when I started the Firestorm fan blog, Ronnie Raymond was dead. And so both our characters were dead. And by the time we stopped the blogs, both of them, you know, one had a movie on the way, the other one was on TV. So it's like, okay, well, you know, mission accomplished. They don't really need us anymore to promote them. We don't need, you know, well, right. When CNN is doing headlines about Firestorm and Aquaman, they don't need my stupid blog out there helping them anymore. So, you know, I had lots of opportunities to talk with Jerry Conway over the years, you know, who's the Firestorm godfather, so really that's kind of why the blogs went away, is because we kind of lost a lot of our passion for it. In fact, we don't do as many episodes of Firestorm and Aquaman anymore. At the Fire and Water Podcast Network, we have a mantra, and that is find your joy. Find what makes you happy and follow that. Because, you know, if we're all reading comics, for God's sakes, we need to enjoy it. You know, there's so many people out there who read comics and just love to complain about them. And it's like, then why are you reading them? You know, we're all too old to sit around and waste time doing stuff that doesn't make us happy. So we're all about find your joy, which is where we're all starting to do our own thing. Like Rob's talking about movies now, and he's talking about Treasury Comics, and he's talking about Bob Dylan. You know, I'm talking about Justice League International. I'm talking about the DC Heroes role-playing game, stuff that makes me happy. And so there's been a lot less focus on Firestorm and Aquaman. We're still doing some. You know, we're trying to do one episode every month or every 2 months, but there's a lot more focus on the other stuff.
Well, I'm enjoying your other work. I love the Who's Who. I love the podcast, the Hero Points. I'm enjoying. Rob's just got his Mashcast podcast.
Yeah, he's doing Mash now too.
That one. I do miss the Firestorm bits because, again, as I've said everywhere, Firestorm is one of my two favorite characters. But I understand where you guys are coming from. Like you say, and I've taken that onto my own mantra myself. That, you know, find your joy. I love that whole thought. So.
And one of the most fun things about the podcast, too, is, you know, Rob and I, when we decided to make it a network, we brought in a couple other folks we felt were sort of like in sync with what we were doing with podcasts. So we brought in Ryan Daly and Siskoid and Chris Franklin, and then eventually we expanded more to bring in Nathaniel Wayne and Zoom Yukinori and Max Romero. And we've actually formed this group of people, amazingly talented people. I mean, I'm consistently amazed when I listen to their shows. I'm like, oh my gosh, this stuff is so good. This is so much better than what I'm putting out. I'm thrilled to just be part of this creative, output. So amazing, amazing folks over there. And that's a huge change for how things started out to where they are now.
Well, first of all, don't sell yourself short. I think you do an amazing job. Like I said, you're the one that got me into podcasting. So I think you do a magnificent job on your shows. So don't sell yourself short there, Shag.
Well, you're very kind. I think I peaked around 2012. It's all been downhill since then, my friend.
So as far as you guys have the network, do you guys plan on adding more shows at this point, or is it just whatever happens, happens?
Oof. Well, every week we have a new idea for a show we want to do, just like every other podcaster in the world. I mean, how many times have we've all been guilty of it. I've seen you do it on Facebook too. You throw an idea out there like, oh, I love this thing. I would love to do a podcast on this, and then you sort of wake up and go, oh, I can't do this. I can't even get my own shows done right now. All of us go through that. So I would absolutely kill to do a podcast on Dr. Fate or Blue Devil or Power Pack or just any number of things that I just love. But or Marvel Unlimited, do a podcast about Marvel Unlimited, just talk about fun stuff there, whatever. But yeah, it's there's just not enough hours in the day.
Do you guys plan on bringing more people in the network, or is that just something that if it happens, it happens?
Not right now. We had the core 5, and we did that for a year. And then after a year, we decided to expand a little bit, and we let in 3 more people that we thought were great. And they've been absolutely fantastic. But right now, we're producing a new show almost every single day. Like, there's not enough days in the calendar anymore to be able to put shows out. So for right now, I think we're done expanding. I think we've grown bigger than our britches can stand.
So as doing the Fire and Water podcast and the Who's Who and all these other shows you do, what seems to be the biggest obstacle that you seem to run into as a podcaster?
Time is the biggest freaking hurdle. Because, just for those of you who don't do podcasts, I don't know, Aaron, if you've ever talked about this on your shows, the editing is a freaking nightmare. Because, you spend all this time prepping, right? You're reading the comic, you're researching the comic, you're finding all the reasons to go, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense when it's something you absolutely love. That's the part of the problem with podcasting is you tear apart what you love when you realize, oh, there's a million plot holes here I didn't see before. Anyway, there's all the prep work. Then there's the actual recording. That's assuming everything works goes off like a hitch, and the recording didn't fail to record or whatever, And then there's the editing, and here's the shocking thing, folks. For those of you who've never edited a podcast, the average, at least amongst we have Aaron is part of a private group where we all kind of share and exchange ideas on podcasts and podcast producing, and on average, at least as near as I can tell, it takes most people 1 hour to produce 15 minutes of edited audio. Is that about right for you, or are you at a faster rate?
Well, when I'm doing with other people, yeah, probably about that.
Yeah, because you'd be shocked at how many times people say It's amazing. I'm horrible at it, saying it myself. It's poor Aaron. I don't envy him editing this out. And then also I have a little bit of Tourette's, so I'm constantly blurting out curse words, so he has to cut all those out. Anyway. But the editing takes so long. If you're doing a 2-hour podcast, that's like what 8 hours of editing? Yeah. So just painful. But it's the final product's worth it though.
See, for me, it's kind of the reverse. I don't mind the editing. I can find because I've got a 3-year-old. Yeah, 3-year-old home, so I don't mind because I can put one of his shows on. I can sit there and record, edit G.I. Joe or this show or whatever I'm doing. I can edit while he's watching his cartoons over and over and over again. God help me. But
it's only so many times you can watch Thomas the Train.
Right now he's in the Super Monsters and some Netflix show.
Oh wow, okay. And, mine are 18 and 12, so I'm not even in touch at all with what's hip with kids anymore.
Yeah. So yeah, my difficulty, as I've talked about before, is finding the time to actually record. Finding the quiet time, because the wife, she works a full-time job. She started a job doing cups and T-shirts and stuff on the side to make some extra money. Mm-hmm. So yeah, with a 3-year-old, that's because my 10-year-old, she just turned 10. She's no problem. I can send her to her room. She can go play on her Alexa or something. But yeah, my 3-year-old needs a little bit more attention because, again, we named him Grayson after Dick Grayson But we should have named him Matthew Murdoch. Because this kid has no fear. That he climbed on his potty stool in the bathroom, which was about half a foot away from the bathtub, and he tried to leap into the bathtub. And the wife happened to turn away at that second, missed it. So, a couple of days before I saw him, do not even think about it, young man.
Right.
That's my biggest obstacle, is finding the time to actually record when it's quiet.
Well, that's a challenge too here, folks. Behind the scenes for you, Aaron lives in California, and so therefore he's on Pacific time, whereas I'm on Eastern time. So I know trying to sync up with people in different time zones is also very challenging because, for me, I can't record till my kids go to bed. It's absolutely impossible. It just doesn't work. So I'm able to record at 10:30 Eastern. Well, it's 7:30 for Aaron. So therefore his kids are still running around. So it's not easy on him. And then there's, you and I have tried to do the late ones where it's more like 10 o'clock your time, but it's like 1 o'clock in the morning for me. And I'm out of energy and it just doesn't work.
Well, and sadly, most of the podcasters I know are either Central or East Coast.
Yeah.
So it makes it even harder for me because trying to find people that I can sync up with. Because like you said, it's 8 o'clock. I got the kids. The kids are settling down. I'm ready for bed, dude. What are you talking about?
Right. Well, for us, it's because all the cool kids are on the East Coast. So that's how it works.
Yeah, that's why I'm on the West Coast because I'm not cool. Oh.
Dad, we're all old and have kids.
So. That's the biggest thing right there. So again, if we can get a little more on the personal side, you've talked about you have kids, so apparently you have a woman that's willing to be with you.
Yes. She made some bad life choices. That's correct.
I got one of those. So how does your wife feel about the whole podcasting? Does it interfere with you guys' personal time or your life with as a husband and father?
No, I don't think so tremendously. I mean, certainly it was an unusual thing for her to have to get used to because she's not a geek. She is completely a muggle, if you will, in regard to the geek world. She's very normal. She's not interested in any of the same stuff we are, and so she doesn't get it, but she knows I enjoy it. She knows it's mainly just me shooting the crap with my friends is what it really is. So the trade-off is, I don't watch football. I don't, go play cards with the guys every week. So whereas some husbands might be wasting time sitting on the couch in their undershirt, picking their belly button, watching football, I'm instead in an office with the door closed talking about people in spandex, So it's a bit of a trade-off there. And, she loves, I'll do this. She'll be watching Netflix or talking with her mom or whatever she's enjoying. So we each have our own individual things we're doing. Right. But her interests do not cross over into this whatsoever. If all of this superhero stuff burned down, she wouldn't care. She's already told me like a number of times, like, when you die, I'm just calling, because she knows the guy who owns the comic book shop I go to. She goes, I'm just calling Ned and telling him to come pick up all this crap, right? I'm like, yeah, I know.
Which I think that kind of answered it, but it brings me another question. Since being married to you, has your wife gotten any geek in her at all at this point? Does she enjoy any? Do you take her to the movies, or does she watch any of the shows or anything with you, or?
She certainly, by osmosis, just picked up a lot of stuff. She knows who Barry Allen is now. I mean, so that kind of thing. Like, so she would watch The Flash with us for the first season or so with me and the kids. So she's picked up a lot, but it really, for the most part, it's just tolerance. She tolerates it more than she's really passionate about it. She loves her own stuff. She loves crime procedural shows, like your NCIS's or Law and Order, or she really leans towards the British stuff, like stuff I don't even know what the hell it is. She loves watching all the British crime shows. She watches all of that stuff. So, I mean, she's got her own thing. It's just not really anything that she gets into that much.
Have you ever had her on a podcast with you? Have you ever recorded with her, or is that just?
I would have to drug her and hide the microphone so that she didn't know she was doing it. Believe me, I have tried. I have thought of I'm like, well, wait a minute. She likes this one thing. What if I get no? Okay. Well, how about if we do this thing that you do like? No. Okay. Well, you like this other thing that we get? No. Okay. It's not happening. I cannot get her anywhere near a microphone. She flat out refuses. She says, you know what? That is your thing. Go do it. Have fun. I don't want to do it.
Leave me out of
okay. Yep. No interest. Now, my daughter's appeared on a couple episodes here and there. My stepson's done some stuff with me before, but not her. She won't go near it.
Yeah, see, my wife's a little more geeky. I've got her on a couple of my shows. We've talked about Game of Thrones and something else. But, yeah, she didn't. She's like, well, I don't like the way I sound. You sound fine, honey. And I've talked to some other friends, and I love that episode. She did a great job.
Yeah, yeah. And, of course, Alexis has done quite a bit there.
Yeah, Alexis wanted to follow her daddy's footsteps, and she wanted to start her own podcast. And so Alexis Speaks. And then she wanted to do one on Taylor Swift. She's doing Taylor Swift songs. I'm like, from what I hear, that can be kind of litigious. I don't know if you want to... but she's done school play recently and cheerleading and all this, so she hasn't had time recently. That and every time she asks, can I do a podcast today, Daddy? Well, I'm dealing with your brother right now, honey. Give me some time and let me... So again, she's trying to do some podcasting. Again, the same thing. The baby's kind of interfering with her doing her podcasting also. But yeah, she's very much her father's daughter. So
poor girl, she doesn't have a chance.
Not one at all. She's doomed. She looks a bit like me. She's got my attitude. She's got my love for comics. So yeah, she's screwed. So
I bet you'll find a way to make it work.
Oh yeah. So, was there anything else that you would like to tell the listening audience about the Irredeemable Shag they may not know?
I don't know if there's anything.
Your lawyer doesn't mind you saying. Let's put it that way.
Right. Well, yeah. Everything has to go through legal. No, I don't know if there's anything that any deep secret to share, but I do think it's fair to say that podcasting has done some amazing things for me in bringing me joy. Because, I had, like all of us, we had friends. We all have friends. Well, you have one friend. But anyway, we all have groups of friends we hang out with. And as we get older, we don't see them as much because of family and just gets busy, right? Well, I used to have a core clique of friends I used to hang out with in person. And that's, I still see some of them, but not as often. But podcasting allows me to talk to people on the other side of the world that I've never spoken to before, or that we share common interests. We get to know each other online. I have made tons of 20 years ago, you would say, oh, if you make a friend on the internet, they're not a real friend. I've made real friends on the internet. In fact, because of my job, I have to travel around the United States quite a bit. It's slowing down. I used to go to about 20 different states a year. Now I don't go to nearly as many, but I travel around a lot. And every time I go to a city, I make sure I can find a fellow online geek I know online and go hang out and have a cup of coffee or have dinner or go to a comic shop or whatever. And I have made some lifelong friends doing this. And it all comes back to blogging and podcasting. Really, truthfully. I feel very blessed to have all these new friends. So it's been an incredibly rewarding experience.
Oh, that's good to hear. That's nice. That's a lot of me. I had one or two people I used to talk with comics about, but we moved up, grown up, moved away, and so I don't really have any close friends that are comic geeks like I am. There's people working here and there, they know I like comics. They'll ask me about it. I got this one guy I used to work with that I was his comic guru. If he had any questions, he'd come out, Aaron, I got a question for you. But even now, I don't work at the same place he's at, so that's one thing I love about podcasting. It gives me a chance to, even the ones I do on my own, I just get a chance to talk about comics. Finding your joy. I talk about the comics I love, and even in the bad issues of them, I still love the comic itself. So, and then when I do these things with people like you, and I got my G.I. Joe podcast where I always have guest hosts on there, I just love that chance. That's whenever I get a chance to record with somebody, I love the interaction and talking with other people like this. So I definitely agree with you that, at one time I was one of those people that said, well, if they're an online friend, they're not really a friend. They're not, if they got your friends list, they're not really friends. They're people you know online. There's a difference.
Right.
But podcasting, and like I say, the Facebook message thing that we're both on, the different podcasters, and the podcasting groups I've been on, and just talking with people like you and Pat Sampson, these other people I've talked with, even though we've never met, I still feel you're like a friend because I listen to you almost on a weekly basis talk. I've talked with you several times between my shows and your show. I mean, we've talked, and I enjoy listening to you. I enjoy talking to you because, again, we've got a lot of the same interest, and you got, give me some different insight into things. So podcasting's been, like you said, it's been a great thing to meet and get to know other people.
Yeah. I mean, you and I have spoken, I don't know the number of episodes we've done together. It's quite a bit. Let's just throw a number out there, 5, 6 episodes. Right. That's anywhere from, 10 to 12 hours we've spent talking. I mean, how many people do you know that you can say, well, yeah, I talked to this person 10 to 12 hours. And that doesn't even count the after the show and before the show, stuff where you're not, quote unquote on,
right,
where you're not performing, because podcasts are entertainment. So when you're off the air, you're a lot more open. You're talking about family or work, whatever that's not bothering you, things like that. You become real friends. Now, talking about some of the folks you just mentioned and people that have been on your show, like Kyle Benning, who's been involved in a lot of your shows.
Yes.
I've now met him twice. Jared Albrecht, he slept on my couch. Michael Bailey and I have known each other for years. Ryan Daly, I met him last year. He spooned me. There's all these different things where these people got to know them. They've become real important parts of my life. Some parts maybe I want to forget, like the spooning. Yeah. But it's been a wonderful chance to make all these friends. And if my job would ever send me to California, I would probably get a chance to meet you face to face. But unfortunately, California is one of the states we don't have any clients in.
Not in restraining order, but that's beside the point.
Right. It's against the entire state.
But no, seriously, I want to thank you for, unless there's something else you want to say, I want to thank you very much for being on my premiere segment for Behind the Podcast.
This has been great. I really appreciate it, because you're right. We don't get a chance to talk the real story of what, VH1 behind the music kind of stuff. We don't get to talk about how the sausage is made, right, and how it changed our lives. And, it's fun. I really dug this. This is a neat idea. I look forward to hearing other folks' segments.
People to talk to me. I'm going to do more of these. Depends on who I get to stay up late to talk with me about their stuff. But
right.
No, I appreciate you breaking the ice with me on this. And why don't you tell the people out there where they can find you if they want to hear more from you?
Well, if you foolishly wish to hear more about me or more of my stuff, head over again to the Fire and Water Podcast Network. .com, and all of our shows are there. I'm on several of them, and all the podcasting partners that I talked about earlier. So yeah, check it out, fireandwaterpodcast.com, or on Facebook, or on Twitter. We're there as well.
I definitely recommend you checking out Shag's shows, because like I said, I listen to most of his shows, and I really enjoy him. He's got a great personality you can hear. He's a great guy, so definitely go and listen to the Fire and Water Podcast and all of their auxiliary shows.
Great, and as we arranged, Aaron, I'll make sure the check's in the mail.
Thank you. It better be here soon. I haven't released this yet, so. And I had a really great time talking with Shag. He's a great guy. I'm glad he stopped by the studio so we could talk, do this whole. I'm really glad that my first guest for my Behind the Podcast was the Irredeemable Shag. Having said that, as I was editing this, again, I recorded that whole section a couple days ago. I'm doing the editing. I was thanking Shag again on Facebook for taking time out of his schedule again to help me and talk with me. And he said he forgot to mention something when we did the Behind the Podcast section. He said he was going to recommend folks to be sure to name their podcast something that will be found via Google. He said that naming their podcast Fire and Water Podcast initially was a real mistake. He said they should have always called it the Aquaman and Fire, the Fire and Water Podcast. And that way people would find it when using Google. It was just a lesson that he learned that he wanted me to let you guys know about. Just a little heads up if you want to get into podcasting. Thanks again, Shag. And now it's time for... Mail time. Mail time. Mail time. The mail's here.
Here's the mail, it never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes, I want to wail.
You've got mail.
And I don't have any emails this time, but I do have one message. I had a Facebook message from a Jonathan Hames, a guy I became friends with through a mutual friend. Long story, won't get into that now. But when we met, I mentioned that I'm into podcasting. He asked what podcasts I do. I gave him my long list. And so he sent me a message, and this is what he said. I listened to the first Armageddon one last night and really got a kick out of it. Based on what you said, at one point it looks like you and I got into comics around the same time, and in a similar manner. My gateway drug was Transformers before I found G.I. Joe. Armageddon 2001 has a special place for me as the first exposure to a lot of DC characters, because I'd only been collecting the Superman and Batman books as well as the JLI. So it was really fun to hear you guys break it down. And I told him thank you. And then that was on a Friday. On Monday he said, it's G.I. Joe against Cobra and Destro fighting to save the day. I'm becoming quite the fan of G.I. Joe Real American Headcast, pushing all the proper nostalgic buttons. So thank you very much for writing in and messaging me, Jonathan. Again, I love hearing from other people and their comic book origins, and I love hearing other people how they got into comics and what they think about my show. So thank you very much. And that's the only feedback I have for this episode, so we're going to close this out here. And I guess that's going to do it for this episode of Head Speaks. Join us next month, as I said earlier, when we look at the next part of the Armageddon 2001 crossover. I believe that is I'm looking at my notes here, that's the Action Comics Annual, number 3, which I talked with Mr. Michael Bailey about. And I may have another behind the podcast, depends what I have time to do. We'll see. But thanks for listening, and as I usually say, remember, Head has spoken. Bye. Thank you for listening to another fantastic episode of Head Speaks. Hope you enjoyed it. If so, let me know. Drop me an email to head@headspeaks.com or visit our home at head.headspeaks.com. You can also visit and talk with me on Facebook and Google+, both under Head Speaks. You can also send an MP3 file with your thoughts, and I can play that on the air. And you can also get more of me on my other podcasts. Be sure to listen to Task Force X, where monthly I look at John Ossinger's Suicide Squad and Paul Kuppenberg's Checkmate comics from the 80s and early 90s. Also, over on G.I. Joe, a Real American Headcast, my podcasting friends Ryan Daly and Kyle Benning, along with myself, are looking at all of the G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero comics, and related titles from Marvel and IDW. All of my headcasts are available on iTunes and Stitcher, along with the respective blogs and my main page at headspeaks.com. All comments, thoughts, and opinions expressed on Head Speaks are owned wholly by the speaker of said comments and do not express the opinions of Head Speaks, unless, of course, I'm the one making the comments. Head Speaks, Task Force X, and G.I. Joe, a Real American Headcast, are all part of the Headcast family. So join us next month for another wonderful episode of Head Speaks. Until then, I'll see you in the funny pages. Good night.